So I'm going to call the meeting of the California Housing and Finance Agency Board of Directors in order on May 21st. Welcome, everyone. Courtney, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Do you guys need a minute?
What do we?
So, something, we have an echo going on.
Nice.
Ms. Cabildo?
Present.
Chair Cervantes?
Present.
Ms. Kurgan for Secretary Moss?
Present.
Ms. Limon?
Present.
Mr. Henning for Treasurer Ma? Mr. Moto? Mr. Prince?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Present.
Mr. Fiegels for Secretary Sin?
Here.
Director Velasquez? Dr. White?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here?
Mr. Acefa? Ms. Peralt for Mr. Stevenshaw?
Here.
And Mr. Surdich?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the last meeting, which was April 16th. There's a little bit of still an echo here, I think. The minutes are in the agenda package, and I'd like to see if there's any comments on the agenda or a motion to approve.
So moved.
Director Russell moved. Is there a second?
I second.
Great. Thank you, Director Williams. Per our protocol, minutes are deemed approved with a motion and a second, so they are approved. Thank you very much. And maybe just to start us off, we've got a pretty full agenda today. We've got three transactions we're approving, three multifamily transactions, and then we're shifting into the strategic plan discussion, kind of following on earlier discussions at the board. So it'll be a lot to go through today. But before I start, a couple of things. I wanted to congratulate our Executive Director, Tony Surdich, on his Senate confirmation, 37-0. Congratulations. So now he's official, and we welcome you and thank the governor and his staff for the appointment and the Senate for confirmation.
Very excited.
Yeah, so are we. And with that kind of a score, we kind of wished you played for the Giants, I think. I'd also note, just for the record, that the Senate Rules Committee considered three of us for renewal. All of Director Moto, Director Prince, and I will note that Director Moto and I passed through at a 5-0 vote. Director Prince was 3-2. So obviously, a lot of consideration there. But we do thank the Senate Rules Committee for passing us on and appreciate the vote of confidence there, and certainly by the governor and his staff for reappointing us.
I hear that a member from San Diego might have had influence over the senator from San Diego.
Could be true. We'll have to investigate that. And maybe one last thing. Just on a somewhat of a personal note, I was at an event last night, the 45th anniversary of one of our partners, the Tenderloin Neighborhood Development Corporation, one of the many nonprofits we've engaged with over the years in financing projects. And it was striking in that, for us, the work is often abstract. We talk about numbers, we talk about balance sheet, we talk about loans, but all that translates into the real world where there are people on the ground making it happen, our developer partners, nonprofits, and other for-profit developers, creating housing for Californians. And so I got a chance to get a flavor of that, which was a nice balance for what we do here as well. There was a comment by Rebecca Foster, who was the Housing Accelerator Fund in San Francisco, calling their work practical visionaries, which I'd like to steal, because I think that's what we're trying to do here as well. We're trying to be practical yet visionary, and I think it's the fusion of that that hopefully gives us the impetus to make a difference for California. So I thought I'd pass that on, because we'll be talking about that later on in our session today on the strategic plan. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to our Executive Director.
Thank you, Chair Cervantes. I'm very excited to have the confirmation process behind us and ready to move forward and, as Chairman Cervantes mentioned, talk about our strategic plan and how we're going to move forward in the coming years. So there is a lot happening on the program side that I will get to, but first I wanted to announce that Governor Newsom has appointed Megan Tokunaga Block as the CalHFA's Director of Program Development and Strategic Initiatives. I want to, first of all, thank Director Peralt for generously
Giving her up.
offering Megan the opportunity to come over to CalHFA from the Department of Finance, where she's been for the last several months. Really excited. She's been working very closely with us on housing budget issues and has a long experience working with housing in both the nonprofit and public sector. So really excited to having her come on. Also, I wanted to, Jim stole my thunder in announcing that he was confirmed, but very excited to have the confirmation done for our board members as well, regardless of the votes. On the CalAssist Mortgage Fund, I wanted to, there was, last week, the governor announced his May revised budget. There was a lot of praise and discussion of a CalAssist Mortgage Fund. We're over 1,000 Los Angelinos have been assisted with the program. Very excited about that. Total, we've had 1,205 families get grants, totaling $41 million. So we're very excited to move forward. The other thing that was announced in the May revised budget that we are working on is the Los Angeles Disaster Rebuilding Fund. The governor announced a $100 million fund that CalHFA will administer. This will be used to reduce borrowing costs for construction loans. So we're going to do that in a multi-pronged approach. The initial programs that our homeownership team is working on are around a mortgage guarantee fund, as well as a construction loan buy-down. And so we're working through that to help make rebuilding more affordable and more accessible to Angelinos, survivors of the fires. We've been working very closely with administration, governor's office, agency, Department of Finance, HCD, to build a program that's going to be as effective as possible. Also doing a lot of outreach. I want to thank Ellen Martin and her team specifically for the outreach that has been done with survivors, community organizations, lenders, and other stakeholders in this effort, philanthropy, to really make sure that the program is built out in a way that's going to be as impactful as possible.
Great.
And we will keep you updated on this as we move forward with any future actions we may need from the board to make this happen. The Dream for All program, just yesterday morning, we sent out 2,000 messages to potential first-time home buyers, letting them know that they've been approved for a voucher for Dream for All awards. They have 90 days to look for a home, and if they need another 90 days, we'll get it. So they have almost 6 months to ultimately get their home and use the down payment assistance shared appreciation. We also were able to target 15% of these to qualified census tracts to make sure that we're really supporting those that are coming from areas of the most need across the state. And once Ellen slows down on both the Dream for All and the Disaster Rebuilding Fund, she'll provide a more in-depth presentation for you all about where we're headed with Dream for All. Last big program update is the Mixed Income Program. We sent out the 2026 award letters in early May. 13 developments after the initial review were awarded Mixed Income Program awards. We planning on those 13 projects, total 1,768 units. Will provide $63 million in MIP subsidy. We worked through, it will use up essentially all of our bond allocation as well for that, and a large chunk of the state tax credits that are assigned to the Mixed Income Program. Where staff is now fully underwriting all of the projects to make sure they meet the full criteria, and we will continue to we will bring those to you over the coming year for formal approval on the lending side. The 2025 projects that were awarded, of the 12 developments, we're bringing 3 more today. That would be 8 of the 12 total will have come to the board. The next 4 will be coming in the next month or 2 for final approval from the board. Last but not least, an update on all of the travel and outreach that we've been doing. Meji Tabar and I were at the NCSHA Legislative Conference, meeting with, I believe, 13 congressional members from the California delegation in early April, or no, late April. It seems months ago, but I guess it was pretty recently. May 7th, I was down in San Diego at the Novogratz Affordable Housing Conference, where I spoke with my colleagues Gustavo Velasquez and Marina Wyant. And Gail Tateyama represented CalHFA at the National American Indian Housing Council Annual Convention and the Housing Our Relative Summit in Alaska to discuss tribal housing programs. So it's something that has been a focus of ours. It is in our strategic plan, as you will see. And we're taking that very seriously and making sure we do the outreach there as well. Early next month, Catherine McFadden and I will be going to the NCSHA Housing Credit Connect Conference in St. Louis to make sure that we're all educated on the current movement on the tax credit system, which there's been plenty of over the last year. And we will also both be headed down to the California Council of Affordable Housing Conference in Napa to present on June 9th. I think that's all I have. I can go for another 20 minutes or so if you want, Jim, and just start talking, but otherwise I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks so much. Actually, we will move on. Thanks so much for the update. There's a lot going on here. So agenda item 4 is the first of 3 approvals for the board. So I'll ask Catherine McFadden to please come up, talk about the Sierra Vista Apartments in Roseville, and we'll have a resolution for approval. So Catherine, please take it away.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair and members of the board. Catherine McFadden, Director of Multifamily Programs. Happy to be here today. Just wanted to give you a little bit more on the 12 2025 MIP deals. Of the 5 that have been approved, because we're going to do 3 today, 2 have closed. One was the 960 Howard, which we had a great, robust discussion in San Francisco. The Sheridan. Okay, I get them confused. Sherman, and we have a couple more, Victoria Flats and Marinwood, up in the next couple weeks, and then Sheridan thereafter. So we have 3 today, and then forthcoming. So excited about that. And just also wanted to give praise to staff. There was a SIDLAC application deadline, and our team submitted 26 applications.
Oh, wow.
So the 13 MIP and 13 conduits. So I really just want to praise them. It's a lot of work. And we have a lot going on, as you can tell. Okay, so.
We appreciate you getting them in on time.
Thank you so much.
Well said.
I think we got it in the earliest ever, is that right?
Yes, actually, yeah.
We are going to be doing our streamline measures that you'll hear later in our strategic plan, already started. Complete and error-free, no
We'll
deficiencies.
take that as a sworn
All
statement.
good. Okay, so the first item is Sierra Vista Apartments. Here is a rendering of the apartments, so you can see visually. So today we are seeking board approval of a $31,189,127 first lien CalHFA permanent loan and a $4 million MIP subsidy loan. The project is 192 units. It's mixed income, family. It's going to have 8 3-story walk-up buildings located in Roseville and Placer County. And the unit mix is 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. The average affordability is 60%, and the rents are below market, 10 to 80% below market rents. And the projected lease-up is about 6 months. The developer is Caroni LLC. It's an emerging affordable housing developer, and it's the first project under this entity, but the principals have actually completed 12 affordable projects. The co-developer is a Darte LLC, and it's experienced sponsor with 18 projects totaling over 2,200 units. The general contractor is Stamus Corporation. It's a general contractor with 40 years of experience. The managing general partner is Greek Orthodox Housing Corporation, and they're also the land seller. They are a nonprofit who are providing the sponsorship to enable the tax exempt status, and they've also partnered with the developer on other successful projects in the area. The service provider's life steps, the property management is FPI, very experienced. Moving into the capital and financing structure, we have Wells Fargo as the construction lender and the tax credit investor. We have bonds, taxable, and we have federal tax exempt and taxable bonds, and we have federal tax credits and no state tax credits requested. The city of Roseville has a small CDBG loan that they are contributing. And during the perm phase, there's going to be additional, in addition to the CalHFA perm, the MIP, the Roseville CDBG, there's going to be deferred developer fee, some bond funds of earned interest, and tax credit equity. The property has a lot of energy and sustainability features, water efficiencies, efficient HVAC systems, Energy Star, all the good energy efficiency. And what I wanted to note is the total development cost is approximately $460,000, and the hard cost of that $460,000 is $226,000. And the local impact and permit fees are $60,000. I'm giving you this context because we're going to go into a couple projects later, and I want to set the stage for some of the costs that you're going to be seeing later. Wanted to talk about the deferred developer structure. One of the exceptions that you'll note is that we are underwriting, assuming 100% of the surplus cash going to the deferred developer fee. And this is required by the tax credit investor to avoid a year 15 potential recapture. We don't want to have any basis loss. Tax credit investors are putting this as a requirement in their limited partnership agreement, and this is standard market. I know that we have a policy that it's 50% and 50%, and the deals that you've seen last month and you're going to see forthcoming, they have relatively large deferred developer fees. The 25% test had some impact, and so in addition to having to get taxable bonds or having to defer more fee and maybe even put in some GP contributions to make sure that they close the gap. So the residual receipts payment after the deferred developer fee, there will be a 50-50 split, then that will go to the MIP to repay the MIP subordinate loan. So I just wanted to clarify that structure. I know we talked a lot about that in the projects last time, but just wanted to reiterate and ensure that we understand that. And we've approved these in the past and recommending that approval of this today. So with that, I and my team, and we have developer representatives on the line to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to see if there's any questions or comments from the board. Director Russell and then Director Henning.
So I have to say I'm intrigued, looking at the diff fees on the three projects we've got today.
Yes.
And this one, I'd be interested in where, with Sierra Vista, it's $11 million in diff, representing 13.4% of the total construction costs versus 3.6 million or 5.5% on La Estancia and 1.55% on Francis.
Yes.
So quite a divergent range.
Yes.
I know there's a proposal from the governor's office, a trailer bill that would prevent that from being the case. Can you talk about what makes this case exceptional, that the 11 million is such a high percentage of the project?
So we do have the developer on the line. I know that it's in a more of a new growth area, and there's a number of fees and those impact fees. Can we have the developer speak to the precise nature of the $11 million of impact and permit fees?
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. This is Alex Damas representing the developer. First, thank you for your consideration. We are very happy to be doing another project with CalHFA. This is our second. We did one in round one, so we're very happy to be with you again here today. The impact fees certainly are high and higher than state averages and this sort of thing. The project, as others have mentioned, is an inclusionary zoning project that is in a new growth area of West Roseville. The project benefits from a lot of beautiful infrastructure improvements like streets and street trees as a result. but also as a result, it is a newly developing area with the need to build that infrastructure. And as a result, the impact fees are quite high.
Okay, that's illustrative, I guess, more than satisfying, maybe as an answer. Because that's, we've seen municipalities that actually use really high fees to actually prevent the feasibility of affordable housing, or when we do finally bring our projects to bear, they're providing things the city should be providing, we believe already.
Could I just add one thing to Alex's comment?
Yes, please.
And we verified this with the city when we were ordering the appraisal. There is a bit of a trade-off, so the per unit annual assessments are quite a bit lower than we normally see.
Thank you for that clarification. The other thing that caught my eye is the inclusionary. This is fulfilling an inclusionary requirement of a market rate, same developer, different developer. What is the nature of that? How is that structured, I guess, is my question.
Alex, the master developer and your entity are related?
No, they're not related. This is part of, as I mentioned, a newly developing part of West Roseville where they're building primarily single-family homes. So this is an unrelated market developer building those effectively tract homes, and we're fulfilling the inclusionary requirement.
I'd be interested, not on this deal in particular, because I don't want to get caught up in it, but understanding how you value, how do you calculate the contribution that developers make to inclusionary deals to make sure we're meeting, actually, these things are actually financing the affordable housing? Again, I'm not going to ask that on this particular deal right now, but I'd like us to look at that. And the last question I have is, this is an emerging, am I remembering the right one? This is the emerging developer?
Yeah.
The emerging developer, while they are emerging, they have completed 12 affordable housing developments.
Okay, and that was in here, I think, and because that caught my eye, and I'm really interested in hearing, again, not as part of this particular deal, but I'd love to get a better sense of how the emerging developer program incentive has actually played out. I'd like for us to understand as we move through the years here.
Yep. Noted on both fronts.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Director Russell. Director Henning?
I think mine's just more of a clarification. I thought I heard that you said that this did not receive state tax credits, but we've heard this project come up in front of us, in front of SIDLAC and TCAC.
For the bonds.
Oh, for the bond.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Other question, Director
So
Prince?
I am not going to talk about deferred developer fee loan. I just want to build upon what Director Russell raised. I think both are really interesting things. There are so many times when a single-family developer does a master plan, they set aside something for affordable housing, and it never gets built. So I'm really glad to see it's actually happening. So I think paying attention to that, and I feel like that's something that happens throughout, particularly more rural suburban areas than with the single-family subdivisions that happen. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I also think there's something really important about as cities are trying to develop areas, that the improvements and the assessments stay in that area, because there are also times when cities have made commitments and have to retire debt associated with improvements in another part of the city, and then the new assessments are really paying that off. And so again, seeing that it's tied to what's happening in that neighborhood is really important. So I thought both of those things are great questions you asked and great answers from our developer.
Other questions or comments? And I will note, I appreciate the elaboration on the deferral of the repayment of MIP, the 100% to the developer. I had a question about that earlier. Thank you for walking through that. It was very helpful. So unless I'd like to see maybe if there's any comments or questions from the public at large. Courtney, if you could just check, please.
Certainly. If any members of the public would like to make a comment either virtually or here in the room, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we've got Resolution 26-13 up. Before we ask for a motion to approve, I will make, there's one minor correction in this, in the hard copy versus the electronic version. There's a whereas that refers to the executive director approving the authority delegated to him. This is March 10th of last year, should be her. we're going to make sure that that's noted in this resolution and the ones following. Proper credit to our interim acting executive director last year who got this done and made this happen. So with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve Resolution 26-13.
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Director Henning. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director White. With that, we have a motion made and approved. Courtney, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Cabildo?
Aye.
Chair Cervantes?
Aye.
Ms. Kurgan?
Aye.
Ms. Lamone?
Aye.
Mr. Henning?
Aye.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Fiegels?
Aye.
Dr. White?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Resolution 2313 is approved.
Great. Thank you very
If I
much.
may, just for a second, Tricia Issam is the Director of the Department of Housing for the City of Roseville, and I saw that she was referred to. I just want to give a shout out to someone who runs a housing department and a small housing authority at the same time. These kind of creative partnerships to help meet that community's housing needs is a testament, I think, Mr. Williams will agree, to the hard work that happens with housing authority and housing authority directors.
Duly noted. Thank you. And we'll talk more about housing authorities later on, I think.
Every day, we got to do it.
Every day, got to do it. Great. Our next item is Agenda Item 5, La Estancia. If you
Yes.
walk us through this, please.
Yes, okay. So today, we're seeking board approval for a CalHFA permanent first lien loan in the amount of $18,375,774, and $4 million in the MIP subordinate loan. La Estancia is a new 190-unit mixed-income family development in the neighborhood of Reseda in the city of Los Angeles County. There will be 888 income-restricted units between 30 to 70% of area median income. The unit mix is 55 studios, 65 one-bedrooms, and 72 bedrooms, and the average affordability is 48.99%. The unit rents are 10 to 64% below market rents, and it's a one 6-story elevator-served building over a concrete garage, and it's expected to lease up within 5 months. The developer is a very experienced developer, AmCal Enterprises, Inc. The managing general partner is Brandon Affordable Housing, also known as Las Palmas Foundation. The general contractor is a related affiliate, AmCal General Contractor. Property management is also very experienced, as FPI Management, and the resident services will be Life Steps. The construction lender is JP Morgan Chase Bank, and the tax credit investor is Hudson Housing Capital. The financing structure includes taxable bonds, tax-exempt bonds, recycled bonds, federal and state tax credits, and other perm sources outside of the bonds and state tax credit and the MIP is the deferred developer fee. The land was acquired in March at an arm's, I think it's March 2025, at an arm's length purchase. And there were some single-family homes, and all those residents have been permanently relocated as of April. There will be 62 on-site residential parking spaces. There is additional street parking, and there are also 3 nearby public city lots. Wanted to note that there will be sustainable features, water-efficient landscaping, solar PV system, Energy Star appliances, and Cal Green compliance. The total development cost per unit is $376,000. The hard costs is approximately $201,000 of that $376,000. And just for comparison, the impact and permit fees are approximately $19,000 per unit, which was different than the other project, which was $60,000. One of the ways that the developer has achieved such a efficient cost model is that they have achieved significant framing cost savings through locked pricing. That's really one way to get certainty and to deliver cost efficiency. And they're also in the final contracting stages, and as you go out earlier, you get your bids, you get your subs lined up. That's another way as they go through getting all the subs under contract. And we're underway on a plan and cost review to verify both the schedule of values and the plan and cost review. And that's part of every development. There's a lot of layers, the investor, the lender, and CalHFA have a very comprehensive plan and cost review. So we do have some underwriting and term sheet variations. One is the 10% below market requirement. And I wanted just to address that in a little bit greater context. So the underwriting rents for the studio and 2 bedrooms are right now 1 to 3% below the TCAC maximum rent. And this is due to a 10% market, below market requirement, both in our term sheet as well as under CIDLAC. It has to be 10% below market. So what happens is the regulatory restrictions will remain at 70%, but our appraisal came in and it came in under. So right now the rents will be adjusted and there will be a time, and typically what happens is there'll be another market study at the time of perm conversion, and then we'll underwrite the rents to see if those 70% rents can be achieved. Historically, they have been able to be achieved, but if they can't, then they're going to have to reduce that to remain in compliance with both our term sheet and the statutory requirements under CIDLAC to be 10% below market. So we are recommending this. We have done this in the past, and we need to meet that 10% below market, which is why you see that deviation and reduction and why we're calling this out as an exception to our policy. There's also the surplus cash distribution, similar to the previous project. In order to pay the deferred fee by year 15, we're recommending the approval to have 100% of surplus cash go towards the payment of the deferred fee. There is also going to be a City of Los Angeles, and CalHFA agreements will be subordinate to those agreements from the City of LA. And there is a remaining deferred developer fee projected in year 15, and that will be paid from the borrower's 50% of surplus cash. Just wanting to note that. So staff recommends approval of this item. We are available along with the developer online if you have any additional questions.
Right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments from members of the board?
Just
Director Cabildo.
yeah, just a really quick question. I noticed that in the report, they have a construction start date of June 1st. So are they really, based on our approval, ready to go in less than 2 weeks?
That might push out about a month, yeah.
But eminent, yeah.
Yes, it
They're
is.
really ready
It
to go.
is.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
We do have an extension from CIDLAC, just so you're aware. That's 60 days, so we anticipate closing around June 30th.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, so I know that you mentioned that the cost per unit was probably, the cost savings were probably due to framing cost savings, subcontractors that they were able to get good deals on. But just in terms of the entire package that we're voting on today, it seems to be a lower average per unit cost than I've seen in the past 3 years that I've been on the board. So my question is, are there finally, some of the streamlining or legislative wins that we've had over the past few years, are they finally being implemented? Could we be seeing some sort of streamlining legislative processes that are now coming into effect that are influencing some of these lower cost per units? And this is a question for you, this is a question for everybody else on the board. Is this something that we're seeing writ large, or is this just we happen to get 3 really good developers that are able to get really good deals?
I would say it's probably a combination. We are seeing the lower cost primarily in Los Angeles projects. And as you know, there's a very robust buy right and other incentives. I'll let the developer speak specifically, but what I can say is given the lower impact fee, it's likely it's part of the package that's being offered through the city. And then I would also note that the units are a bit smaller. We do have studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms, and there is efficiency with a 1 building, 6-story elevator served building. So as opposed to, say, many buildings or lots of elevators, there is efficiency there. There's 62 parking spaces to the 190 units. So as we know, the cost of parking, right, is
Yeah.
quite expensive. And then I would also say, just given my kind of brief review of the development budget, I could see that there are further efficiencies. Now, we're trying to get efficiencies in hard costs, but we also need to get efficiencies in soft costs. And that's looking out to our developer partners, you know, legal, architecture. I mean, some things we can control, some things we can't control, like impact fees. But I would say I'm really, you know, optimistic that this is something that we are seeing in this project, the next project that I'm going to present, and then the 2026 MIP projects that came through with LA. A huge nod to efficiency in a way I haven't seen
Yeah.
as well. And so I think it is a combination of many things, and policy at play being implemented is likely a contributing factor here.
Yeah, and I think we discussed this earlier, but I think it's important that we take all of these projects as just opportunities for learning and opportunities to increase or advance the housing discourse in the state of California. And insofar that we can track kind of if there are trends, and that we can have other, you know, think tanks or other folks just overlay them with some of the other maybe streamlining or maybe some of the other policy changes that might have coincided with some of the lower per cost unit. But I just want to make sure that we're continuously providing data for the broader conversation around housing affordability.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I'd like to add something, and I know we're going to hear from the developer, but I think that, you know, when I saw for the low per unit cost, I was like, oh my God, this is so strange, it's LA, and then I saw it was AmCal. And so AmCal just is a really, I don't know what's the right thing, but I mean, they've been present in the LA market for a really long time, really great track record, and they have the advantage of they're the contractor as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're not going to likely have the kind of issues around runaway change orders that you might have when you're going out and hiring your GC separately. So I think they just have the ability to control so much of the construction process also. So I think that's also a huge advantage here. Because otherwise I would have been really worried. Also, like the contingency, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
But it's AmCal, so I just had like this confidence. So, I mean, I'd love to hear from the developer as well, but I feel like when I was a developer, I was always very jealous of folks like AmCal that had that in-house property management and construction, because they could just control all aspects of it and really keep costs down.
Our last project with them, when we closed the perm loan, it came in under budget and early.
Yeah. They're top-notch.
So if I maybe piggyback on some of these, this is a line of questions I had. I really appreciate that. And maybe this is a question, really for a question for the developer. I appreciate that, you know, using the locked pricing, they're able to, and maybe the more vertically integrated operation, they're able to sort of manage the cost structure. But I'm just kind of curious, this is a question for the developer. We've heard a lot about manufactured housing and what a difference that can make. That's not being utilized here, though. But yet they're able to get cost savings. I was kind of wondering, what's the developer's take on that? Is that really what, we all want to drive down the cost per door. So I'd just like to get their take on like this approach or the approach they're taking versus say manufactured housing.
I would just say that can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Our experience with, my experience with that manufactured housing, both at AmCal and prior to this, I've been doing this for about 25 years, is that there had been a great challenge in actually bringing costs down as a result of manufactured housing. I think generally people find that there are efficiencies from a timing standpoint, but from a cost standpoint, it's been a challenge. And I think that maybe this may be a day where that evolves to the place where it's more efficient, but I have not seen a compelling argument for manufactured housing in terms of actually bringing costs down yet. Just because of all the infrastructure is where a lot of the costs are, and there are a lot of things you have to prepare before you actually start building the building. As it relates to some of the efficiencies that we get, and you talk about locking lumber costs, obviously that's a very big one because framing is one of the biggest subcontracts we have. And so we have had the advantage. I mean, in the prior project that Kevin was referencing, we had potentially a $6.5 million bust on framing. And as we kind of looked and tried to watch the price of lumber, we managed to lock it in and save $3.5 million in that project as well a few years ago. And so part of it's because we do a lot of development, we do a lot of large projects, and we have those kinds of relationships with our subcontractors and materials folks.
Okay,
One more.
it's helpful. Yes, Director Kurgan.
I really appreciate all the cost savings discussions that we're having. I'm going to go in a different way for just a second, because as you pointed out, Catherine, and also Director Russell, comparing a few different projects, the last project had a lower number of 30% AMI units. This one has a higher percentage, but a lower annual services budget. And so I just wanted to check in, maybe Life Steps is leveraging other sources to complement services. Just, I do see an investment in services budget as a way to actually save resources, not only for the household, but in vacancy loss and preventing unit turns and evictions, that services is a positive investment that can actually increase cash flow. So not only for the benefits that it causes to the residents. So developer, Alexander, if you wouldn't mind speaking to how you all think about services provision at your properties and specifically this one.
I think starting specifically with this one, we actually don't have like a special needs component or a project-based vouchers or a special group of tenants that we are appealing to that require that higher level of service, as it turns out. So I think a lot of when you look at special needs deals, you go from having OpEx that might be 6,500, 7,100, 8,000, up to 12,000, 15,000. I mean, the numbers are just dramatic. And so when you've seen a lot of PSH units, then I think that it makes our services look much less expensive. So this is not the chronically homeless, it's not special needs folks. So we'll continue to have a kind of a group of services that includes ESL, access to computer classes, access to health services, and kind of a more basic package than when you have kind of higher acuity tenants.
Yep, yeah, it's noticed it's not PSH, and I understand that. It's just the high number of a lower AMI. There's, higher pressures of cost pressures, smaller budgets to work through for the household. So I'm sure you all have a services team that refers out if you all can't handle it in-house.
Yeah, we've worked with iStep for, I'm sure, like the last 20 years. So we're working with the exact same people you're referring to. So we work with Craig and those folks on each development, and it's kind of size things according to what the group of folks we have in the development are going to be.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board? I don't see, is that Director Russell?
A quick comment regarding cost, because I'm watching a project in my home neighborhood go up by Avalon Bay where they're panelizing. So they're trucking in the panels so that they're using less off-site storage, and the speed is pretty rapid. So I just want to throw in there that in between standard framing and manufactured housing, there's different levels of pre-manufacturing that can contribute. So it's exciting times. I think some of these things are being explored more aggressively in this cost environment.
Okay, thank you. Courtney, can you see if there's any public comment or question on this?
Any members of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Okay, great. So unless there's any other questions or comments from the board, I'd like to get a motion to approve Resolution 2614.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Great, thank you, Director Kabila and Lee. Motion made and seconded to approve Resolution 2614. Courtney, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Cabildo?
Aye.
Chair Cervantes?
Aye.
Ms. Kurgan?
Aye.
Ms. Lamone?
Aye.
Mr. Henning?
Aye.
Mr. Prince? Yes. Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Fiegels?
Aye.
Dr. White?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Resolution 2614 is approved.
Great, thank you very much. And then our last multifamily transaction is Francis Avenue Apartments. If you could walk us through this, please.
Absolutely. Okay, the board action item requested today is approval of a $38.9 million CalHFA first lien permanent loan and a $4 million mixed income program subordinate loan. So Francis Avenue Apartments is a 232-unit new construction mixed-income family apartment in Koreatown in Los Angeles. There's 230 income-restricted units with the AMI between 30 to 70% of AMI and 2 managers' units. The average affordability is 59.83. The unit mix is 101 SRO studio units, 36 one-bedroom and 95 two-bedroom units. I did want to just clarify that all the SRO studio units have their own full kitchen and bathroom. And the rents are 12 to 64% below market rents. The bond and tax credit financing are SIDLAC tax-exempt bonds, recycled bonds, and taxable bonds, and federal tax credits, and no state tax credits. In addition, on the permanent structure, in addition to the CalHFA perm loan and the MIP subsidy loan, there's going to be net operating income and a deferred developer fee and a general partner GP loan. The development team is MRK Partners and Six Peak Capital LP. MRK is a experienced developer, and Six Peak currently owns the land and is going to sell it to the borrower in a related party transaction. The construction lender is Citibank, and the tax credit investor is R4 Capital LLC. The general contractor is LV Affordable Construction, and it's an affiliate of the developer. The service providers are All Things Are Possible, providing after-school programming and family resources. The property management is Wynn Residential California, an experienced affordable housing property management company. So what I wanted to talk about, because this has come up with briefings, is that there is 0 on-site parking. And this is a transit-oriented development with multiple stops within 0.1 tenth of a mile. And this was enabled by legislation, AB 2345, which eliminates parking requirements near major transit stops. So if you're within a half mile of a major transit stop, there's no parking required. And there was additional density supported by the city's density bonus agreement. And so this project, I know there was a lot of conversation about no parking. And it is transit-oriented development. There are nearby parking garages within a half mile if folks should need to have parking. But I think we're really moving with the goal of TOD and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and the location of no parking in near major transit stops. The project will have a number of sustainability features with central electric water heating, passive bathroom ventilation, Energy Star appliances, and then the smaller average unit sizes and increased density actually reduce the cost. We have a number, as mentioned, 101 studio units. The cost, just in comparison to the other project, is approximately $359,000. Of that, the hard cost is approximately $187,000 per unit. And then this is by far the lowest combination of local impact and permit fees are approximately about $5,400 per unit. Some of the drivers for the cost efficiency is that there's not going to be any shoring or deep excavation required. There is the reduction, as mentioned, in the permitting and impact fees. There's no prevailing wage requirement, which is atypical in LA. That's also contributing to the lower cost. And similar to the other projects, there's going to be a robust plan and cost review to affirm the hard cost assumptions. There was also some discussion about the market and absorption. The strong location is in Koreatown, which is located near the Wilshire subway access and downtown LA job centers. So the capture rate is below 2% for the all AMI bands through 2030, and the estimated lease-up is 7 months. Koreatown is LA County's second largest multifamily submarket, and the delivery in 2028 is aligned with tightening affordable rental demand. So the time it comes on the market it is anticipated to have a strong demand. One of the exceptions that we have is to meet the tax credit investor requirements is that there'll be 100% of surplus cash to repay the deferred developer fee to make sure it's repaid within the 15 years. Staff recommends approval of this action item and available for questions along with the developer online.
Great, thank you very much. Are there questions or comments from the board? Director Williams.
Thank you, Catherine. I've already had my, when I hear, my architect hat on, transit-oriented development is a wonderful thing. But the idea of having all these units and there not even being any parking, I know that greenhouse gas and all that is, but then you have the reality of the livability of a development. And so when there's none, not even for visitors, if somebody's gonna, come visit you, they gotta park a half a mile down the road at the structured parking garage. Those are always issues, but at least the construction price per unit is good. So when they tell their visitors, look, there's a parking garage a half a mile down the road and you have to walk to my unit, but my unit was affordable. From a construction standpoint, take that into consideration. But I just need to, what's the difference between an SRO unit and a studio? Is it just different terminology, or is there something structurally or design from it? What's the difference?
SRO, single room occupancy studio. In my mind, there's some distinction. In the past, SROs would share bathrooms, and they would only be just a bedroom. So I guess the distinction here is it's a single room occupancy, but it's a studio, and it has a full kitchen and bathroom.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So Mr. Williams has to now property manage a site that I was the developer of in Fresno where we did no parking or very little parking, and it was a lesson learned. So I just want to kind of agree with everything. I thought it was the right choice then, but I think 15 years later, it might be and it's downtown Fresno, and it's an issue. So I just want to bring that up. And then I think an SRO doesn't have the full kitchen. It has like a smaller kitchen version, so it's good to know it's the full kitchen. So I think both great points.
I think I saw Director Russell and then Director White.
Just a comment, Director Williams. If you're going to do this in any city and in LA, you're going to do it in Koreatown.
Yeah.
And you're correct.
Yeah.
You are going to walk a few blocks to get to this apartment. That's what residents of Koreatown do. It's part of the culture. So not surprised.
Okay. Thank you. Director Russell.
Well, so the two topics I wanted to talk about have been talked about, so I'm just going to add some spin, the SROs and the parking. I think we should, unless there's a compelling reason to have the term together, we should disaggregate them because one carries baggage and history and
Sure. Okay.
and it has some definitions that may or may not apply to the studio. So I think studio is the most accurate representation there. Because we have separate SRO regulations, for instance, City of San Diego, many
Yes.
cities do. And these, unless you want them to be captured by implication, you don't want to be captured. The parking issue, I would agree also that the parking in this particular neighborhood is probably one of the few in California where, well, it is one in California. I won't say whether there's few or many, but it's where no parking could probably work. It is, and I would hope that we would look at future projects that are doing no parking. I have experience with local members who have done the no parking in order to get the cost down to be competitive, and then they're having trouble renting the units because, in fact, people's lifestyles, things like a lot of our residents are tradespeople, and they need a truck in a secure location. They can't park on the street or other issues. So if you don't have parking, what some of these people have done is actually hired transit coordinators or transportation coordinators at their own expense to work with the building, spend extra effort during the recruitment process and lease-ups in order to actually insist that people think about what it means to live without a parking space and don't just let somebody, because people will find an apartment, they're thrilled, they figure they'll work it out. One parking ticket for street sweeping day can just really destroy their finances for an extended period of time. Long way of saying, in the future, as we look at these projects, the additional operational costs of not having parking are real, or alternately, the higher vacancy rates because people choose to move out after they actually experience what that challenge can be. And I'm, again, with you, I'm all about transit-oriented development, and I'm all about having zero parking requirements, but that's supposed to allow the market to make decisions. And unfortunately, we're in a particular market because we're so cost-driven. It is almost entirely a cost-value kind of proposition. So some of my members have proposed projects with zero parking where they would rather have provided parking, but they would not have been sufficiently competitive to win. And so I just want us to be aware of these things as we look at projects in the future.
Thank you.
Director Cabildo.
Yeah, so this was, I was an appointee to the City of LA Planning Commission under 2 different mayors, and I think the hardest part was having to approve projects like this, especially under the new streamlining, because you know that the community still does have a need for parking. It's one of the reasons I left, because I didn't feel good approving these type of projects. One of the things I was curious about in terms of the restricted by agency, you mentioned that part of the low per unit cost is because there's no prevailing wages. So I guess I just wanted to make sure that the LAHD regulatory agreement is because of the density bonus, correct? It's not because of any financing?
Correct.
Okay, because in the other one, it seemed like the density bonus regulatory was like identified separately, or not by agency, but, okay, so that's it. Yeah, so I guess I just want to say, I know that just from a livability standpoint, I just feel so uncomfortable, but I realize that, I mean, they have their approvals. So, and we need the housing, but it is tough.
Other questions, comments? Maybe just a couple observations and a question, probably for the developer. So our son lived on the edge of Koreatown, and I know from some experience that finding parking there, around there, was always a challenge. He got parking tickets and got towed. So I'm really curious to see how this all plays out. I'd love for us to keep an eye on this, because to me, it's an opportunity to learn something. I get the policy, I get, and to Director White's point, if you're going to have no parking, Koreatown's probably the area for it. But by the same token, there are real trade-offs. I'd just be curious, just for us to keep an eye on this one and see how it works. That was one. The second is that, to Director Russell's point, when I think of SROs, I'm thinking, my bias is a San Francisco framework where these are buildings that are 100 years old and the bathroom's down the hallway. And I know from a former nonprofit board experience that those are really hard to rent. No one wanted them. And even in buildings where we had modified bathrooms in the units, they're super challenging to get rented. These are really, really small units. And so if we call them studios because they have their own bathroom, kitchen, I'd almost call it a micro studio. So I'm kind of curious hear from the developer, like, what's the game plan for getting these units leased and rented? They're very small. I'd like to get their sense of what the market is and how they see it getting to lease up.
Hi, I'm Kathy Kohler with the developer Eberke Partners. First, I'd like to thank you all for us being here. This is our second deal. We closed our first one a few years back, and it just recently converted to perm. So we're excited to have another deal in the MIP program. For your question on the lease up, so a couple things. First, on the parking, we did have our market study look into the area, and 30% of the existing residents in the area don't own a car to begin with. Like we were saying, I know a lot of people said the population is very driven to walkability, transit oriented, and so that's existing residents that don't have a car to start. That increases as you get to the more affordable bands as well. So it goes up above 30 for our actual target that we're going for. As far as lease up and the smaller units, so most of the development is old. It's over 100 years old, and there's not a lot in the pipeline in Koreatown. So people are going to choose from maybe a slightly larger building, but an older building to a brand new building. So yes, they are a little bit smaller, but it's going to be brand new, and that's just not available in the area right now.
Okay. So then the target market are people who are in existing SROs or the like in Koreatown, likely moving to this because it's new. I mean, that's the game plan.
Yeah, and the qualification of SRO, I believe, is because in the TCAC SIDLAC application process, you can choose to not identify as a unit type. There are no shared, the SRO, as everyone has said, is a shared bathroom or a shared kitchen. That is not the case here. It more has to do with not selecting a designation than anything else. So for all intents and purposes, it's smaller studios. So that is way different, as we've talked about, from having to share a bathroom or share a kitchen.
Okay, all right. Are there other questions, comments from the board? Then, Courtney, could you see if there's any public comment or question on this item?
Yes, if any members of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Okay, great. So unless there's any other questions, comments from the board, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2615.
So moved.
Director White, is there a second?
Second.
Director Russell, thank you. Courtney, can you please call the roll for 2615?
Ms. Cabildo?
Yes.
Chair Cervantes?
Yes.
Secretary Moss? Oh. Seen her.
Was here.
Ms. Lamone?
Yes.
Mr. Henning?
Abstain.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Fiegels?
Aye.
Dr. White?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Resolution 2615 is approved.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think we'd all love to sort of track
Yep.
of all the trends, the loans we've approved. I think this is one that got a lot of attention.
Yes.
A lot of questions, and maybe it's a template for dense urban housing. I think we're all going to curious to see how that all plays out.
Yeah.
I think in the spirit of let 1,000 flowers bloom, this is like maybe in that category.
Yeah, can I just add, I think that one of the challenges here is I do feel that if the local municipality has entitled it,
Yeah.
that also we should be looking on it favorably. I think that's the really tough part, right? Like, I wish we had or I wish the design were better on this, frankly. I wish that we could influence to make projects better, but I just like, we're not in that role in the decision-making process. But I wish that, is there a way for us to have some type of design standard for accessing our finances? Because, I mean, when you compare, like, Estancia's design, it's so much more kind of refreshed, and this looks like a modern take on a 1920s brick building in LA. It's just not very, so I don't know. I'd love to explore if there were ways that our financing could be attached to, like, well-designed buildings that contribute to kind of the built environment in a positive way. I don't know. So just my thought that I have to share.
Thank you, appreciate that. I kind of like the design, but full disclosure.
No, I appreciate all the comments, and one of the things that I wanted to add, as we, I think to your point, we do have the ability to have standards. I think it's especially the case when we are putting subsidy money in, like the MIP money, where we can have different requirements on this, or at least different incentives to push forward different priorities. And as we go through the new HDFC guidelines and process, that is the time where we really will be working with our state partners, including HED and SIDLAC and TCAC, to really make sure that we're all aligned in what we want to incentivize. I think there's definitely things, the parking, there's other things that we have gotten away from as a state. There may be minimums we want to put in there. I don't think it's a parking spot per unit, but there may be some sort of levels we want to have there. I think the only thing is I think getting into design standards is really tricky in terms of figuring out, like the aesthetics becomes really hard. Yeah. I think requiring certain functionality and certain actual requirements is something that we can look at and making sure that we're at the very, either requiring or incentivizing as part of this development.
So I think one of the challenges is that oftentimes when you do have a source of soft financing, cities and other like soft financing providers have like square footage requirements. And if you have a situation where you don't have any soft financing in here and we're the only subsidy, then we also might be, funding projects that are really undersized. So, I don't know, it's just an interesting place, and I think usually there is a soft financing source that is taking care of some of those. But in this situation, obviously, we don't have a second pair of eyes that are in a position to, have, side yard requirements, green space, or unit sizes minimums, so, I don't know, so just.
Yeah, and I just from my history, sitting back in TCAC, having these discussions, it's hard, it's always hard to have a one-size-fits-all across the state as we're doing this. And so, like you said, we are very deferential to the localities of this, but we also want to make sure that we are creating housing that is sustainable and going to best serve the tenants that are living there. So it's something that we'll continue to take a look at.
So I'm keeping notes of some of the questions that have come up through these items, and we'll circle back on that in the other board matters section, because I think there's some good follow-up here. Now, that closes out the loan approvals that we have. We're going to shift over to the strategic plan. I'd like to call a recess to allow time for setup, which will be, let's say, not more than 10 minutes. So we have a break here, and then we'll come back and talk about the strategic plan. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Good? Okay. I'm going to call us back into session. Thank you all. And we're going to shift to discussion of the strategic plan. Kelly Madsen, Director of Enterprise Risk Management, is here with us, along with Michael Gomez. Lopez, sorry, my apologies.
Close enough.
Nah, that's not. I should know better than that. But thank you both so much, especially for all the work you've been doing behind the scenes, and I'm somewhat acquainted with that, but we're bringing it back to us for the board discussion, and we'll look to you to lead this off, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair Cervantes. We're excited to have the board gathered here today to talk about the strategic plan again. It's been quite a journey we've been on together over the last year. We're going to open with Michael leading the board in a short board governance reflection exercise, and then after that, Rebecca Franklin will join me and we'll do a deeper dive into the specific updates made to the strategic plan since our last conversation, and based, of course, on your input, and then also review new elements to the plan since the last time you've seen it. So with that, Michael?
Yeah, great. I'm only going to take about 15 minutes to just kind of get us into a conversation that we didn't have time to get to last time we were together on this topic, which is reflecting on the previous plan and your role, how this group showed up, how this group supported the agency through that experience, and what we might learn from that going forward as we look at the new plan and some of the restructuring and ambition that's been put into it. So Kelly's going to be the scribe today. We're going to write a few things on the whiteboard or the flip chart here just to kind of keep us on track. But I've got a couple questions for you that I'd really like an interactive discussion around. And so we're going to start. We've got the slide. Is that up? We're getting the slide back up. Hang tight for 1 second. There we go. So when you think back to the previous strategic plan, I'd love to just hear a little bit of a brainstorm, a word or a short phrase that describes how you believe the board supported that plan. Just when you look back over that 3-year period and the kind of discussions you had, the conversations you had, what's a word or a phrase that you think reflects your collective approach to, support of cabinet and the agency in the plan itself? There's no right answers here. Just kind of, yes, sir.
Sustained vision.
Sustained vision, okay.
And I'll add on with the sustained engagement.
Sustained engagement, okay.
Encouraged staff.
Encouraged staff, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say supported staff, so +1 on that one.
Okay.
Promoting innovation.
Promoting innovation, okay.
This
This is not a phrase, it's just a. New Opportunities Committee.
New opportunities. You're making a face when you say
No,
that, so is there, okay.
No, it actually exists, that's
Yep.
what I'm saying.
Yep. What else comes to mind? Yes,
Oversaw progress.
okay.
I don't see the word, so I'll say it, empower staff.
Empowered staff, okay. Anything else come to mind? Just a couple quick questions on.
I'm the wet blanket. I thought our role was a little perfunctory and rubber stampish, but that was just my experience.
Okay,
We're talking about the last one.
the last time around, yep,
I feel different about today.
okay. We're gonna get to that question soon.
I'll make sure that everyone knows, like,
Just with
I
three
see a
votes
change.
there.
Okay, a little rubber stampish. Anyone else feel?
You know, I guess I'll add, because I felt very engaged last time.
Okay,
So, I mean, I did feel like, I felt like I was kind of a squeaky wheel, but I felt like I was heard.
okay.
So I guess I would,
So high participation, you felt you were engaged, you felt you were heard, there was good
Yeah,
dialogue?
I
you felt
did.
like that? We all don't have to feel the same.
We have a
as well.
different- yeah,
We have,
different
we all have different experiences, that's okay, that's part of the exercise.
I forget most things nowadays, but I have a memory of being engaged in that and feeling like the staff was very responsive, like feedback I provided.
Okay. So this is great. There's a couple themes in here. I'm curious about the sustained engagement and vision, particularly the vision. Can you just say a little bit more about what that means for you?
I think people have ideas for wanting to look over the horizon.
Okay.
And I think that the board has consistently harped on that theme. It isn't something we just said once and walked away from.
Okay.
This idea of like, are there other new opportunities, like the committee had here, that we could be pursuing? I think there's a consistency behind that.
Gotcha, okay. Supporting staff, encouraging staff, this group felt like, in terms of, and certainly a question for the cabinet would be, how well did you interact with agency leadership, the cabinet, the staff? That seems to be a pretty high indexed experience. Pushing new opportunities, and then one, I think, very honest comment about feeling a little bit perfunctory. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
I mean, I am trying to think back, you're talking about a time frame from 2021?
2020 to 26, yeah.
Yeah, no. I think that there was this desire to see a more kind of ambitious northern, the North Star, and it felt like there was like, it didn't feel as ambitious as where I feel like we are today with the current staff and leadership.
Okay, that's a great tee up to the next little question and exercise here. So the sort of two questions, we just gave some description of kind of a way of behaving and a way of approaching. Let's talk about maybe moments now and scenarios where we felt like maybe we were operating at the right level or operating at a level that we didn't feel empowered by. So where were the moments, and it could be in this room, it could be through a separate interaction, where you felt like you were operating as a board at the right level, at a strategic level, asking the big questions? Can you think of moments where that was prevalent, where that happened a lot, where it was consistent? What did that look like?
This is relative to the previous?
Yep.
Of the
Yep.
the plan that we're wrapping up now?
Correct.
Not the effort on this
Correct.
one?
Right. We're going to get to that one next,
Okay.
but we're still just reflecting on moments. Conversations, interactions, where it felt perfunctory. What was that like? Why did it feel that way? It's kind of the why did you feel the way that you felt about the answers you just gave.
When I spoke up, I was asked by the previous director if I was really interested in being on the board. So it felt like when I wanted to kind of push things, the response was really negative to me personally. And so it just seems like there was not the encouragement of ideas and questions. It was And again, it was not the staff, it was really,
Yeah.
like, that was a phone call from the previous director, right?
Gotcha.
And so I feel like it's different now, right? And that's what I'm saying, it was this, I don't think that there was this desire to really hear from board members on ideas around like design standards or like different approaches, or really thinking about how do we leverage the strength of CalHFA. And I just feel like it's a different environment now.
Gotcha. You actually answered part of the second question, which is when did it feel like we weren't operating at our best? So that helps. I'll just put both of them up there. So
I think in line with the previous strategic plan, our whole response to the fires in Los Angeles and also the mortgage relief programs that we were able to launch. I think when we talk about supporting staff and having to create something from nothing and deploy it quickly and effectively is something that I think was part of what we talked about. How can we be responsive with products or services that meet the market need or the market demand? And I think that those are examples where we did reflect back on what our goals were as part of the strategic plan and delivered, and in fact still delivering as a result of those programs.
So when you're able to match a big impact, a crisis response moment, rallying as a board, as an agency, that's a moment where you feel like we're operating at our best. That's a great example.
Yes.
I think there were times where we would be reviewing specific projects when the board was able to kind of get into some of the detail of levels of affordability, what was the value of the development in the community. And we had some pretty robust discussions about the sort of how CalHFA values and our mission showed up in how we were evaluating these projects. And I think we relied a lot on staff to guide the work through the last strategic planning period. It almost felt like updates and less directive from the board and more staff-driven to me.
Great.
Which I'm not mad,
Yep, that's
No,
great. So
all
when
good. I
the
trust the
board is
staff.
able to challenge or reflect or discuss the extent to which your mission and values show up, and then let staff be empowered to do the work, you feel like that's operating at our best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it definitely felt like, in some ways, the projects were being brought to us for approval. So it would have been nice to perhaps have some of those conversations before, just so that we could be informed about how the staff got to some of the decisions. And so we were asking questions in real time, had we been able to discuss how some of the more social impact elements of our projects affect CalHFA's work, rather than just doing that in the meeting before approval. So that, to me personally, feels really instructive. So maybe it's just a matter of how and when we provide that feedback.
Timing of those conversations.
Yeah.
Great.
Can maybe it's covered under, my eyes aren't what they were before, but Dreams for All I was really proud of how staff, first of all, stood it up and then quickly made the changes that were necessary. And I think the level of board engagement in that discussion was exactly right, because really high-quality recommendations were brought forward. So it wasn't a matter of us like pulling our hair out trying to figure it out. We had staff we could rely on. The second thing is talking about what the Secretary is referencing is for me, like outline development or the issues that we have, these really walkable or not. We are not making those changes here on the deal that's going to start construction in 30 days, right? But we see that the subsequent deals, I felt very much that there were shifts that were made in evaluating things. So subsequent deals had more of a recognition of those values of the board.
So when the board's able to ask questions that may not impact the immediate project on the table, but it becomes a lesson learned or a filter for future projects in a way that you feel like is a lasting set of considerations.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. What about this going too deep? Maybe, or, sorry, go, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of reflecting, like, in the development of the prior, of the strategic plan that's ending now, and I was thinking back, okay, so I was on the board, it was, I think, my first year. I don't remember us getting into that strategic plan the way we did with this effort. I'd be kind of curious what others who were there then think. I don't know, it just felt like it, we kind of got in it. I don't know how much I feel like we didn't really discuss it maybe as deeply as what we're doing with this effort. Like, for example, one of my realizations, a year or some ago, was that I felt that the goals we had set for ourselves were like too modest. And somehow that was just like kind of what we rolled into. I think we're thinking more about it now. And so I don't know, I mean, I felt like maybe in a way the process leading into the plan we're ending now could have been more robust. I mean, I'm just trying to recollect again from something a number of years ago.
Gotcha. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I was not involved with the last strategic plan process as well. I think my first meeting was when we approved the plan, so I don't remember. But I think the board had a role also in the implementation of some of the initiatives. For example, the California Dream for All board pushed the staff to ensure that there was a broad outreach to various communities, and I think board members assisted with that.
So a targeted role in implementation in places where you're unlocking resources, obstacles, accelerating plans. That's great. What about, just briefly, I want to keep us on track, this second question about maybe going too deep, going into the details, maybe moments where you felt like this group was focused in the wrong areas, and maybe wrong's too loaded of a word, but places where you felt like you all as an entity were maybe diving into spaces that weren't as helpful.
We never did that. We're unhelpful.
Yeah, Michael, just to be clear, I find this board always very helpful.
Right answer.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
I want to get that on the record. That was important.
Good job. He usually says, "Not today," to me.
Well, let's, I just want you to, yeah, go ahead. Please, sir.
No, I think what I find, and I'm not sure I'm getting to your question, but that, I mean, I enjoy the conversation this group has. There's a lot of varying viewpoints and different points of expertise, and I think it's done in a way which is pretty collegial and thoughtful. I mean, I kind of like value the comments that people bring up because they come from really different perspectives, but it all gets out to like, how do we create greater opportunities for housing for Californians? I think we're all kind of, I think, united on that viewpoint.
Yeah,
from
and
different
that's not a loaded question, by the way. It's just to see at times, do you feel like you maybe go into details that you shouldn't? And that's not a loaded question, as if you had. Tony, did you?
Yeah, I guess sort of reframing that, are there times that you come to board meetings and feel like it was a waste of your time or something like that, that your time wasn't spent as well as it could be? Because I think one of the things we're trying to get at here is how can we make sure that we're using all of your valuable time to the utmost.
Yeah. So, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that I'm curious what the staff's responses would be. I don't feel that, I feel that we're curious about things, but I think we always recognize what our role is as members of the CalHFA board. So I think that we may go deep with questions, but I don't think we've gone so deep that we've overstepped our kind of like the authority that we understand. And I think that what I've really liked about this shift is I do have memories of the strategic planning process, because I was relatively new on the board at that time. And I felt that in some ways, I don't know so much if it's exactly what you're saying, Jim, but it felt as though the goals weren't ambitious, they just felt like very technical. And what I've liked about this process is that we are moving more to like having a generative conversation and kind of visioning the type of future that we would like to see. But maybe I'm like, I don't want to be ableist in my language, but I really just don't feel like we've ever gone and like really overstepped. I think we've been very respectful of how professional the staff is here at CalHFA, and still been very deferential to the staff and the hard work they put in.
Appreciate that comment.
Well, and I would be very interested as a board member, if, and this is probably something you have to ask them outside of the room, if people feel other than that, I would be really interested in knowing that, because I think everyone here has been very careful, just as you described, and respectful. I mean, these are people who know things I don't know, and we're here to provide some vision, but not direction, and I think we've observed that.
Yeah, and I don't think that was the point of this question, was to say,
No.
you guys are overstepping.
No,
I don't think that is felt by staff by any means. We're just wondering if that's why I sort of wanted to reframe it. Are there times that you feel like your time is not being valued?
Yeah, no, and.
Other than right now.
This is a great shift to a very simple framework here on this slide about, one of the things that can happen with boards is, drift down into details that might be fueled by curiosity, but, and they come from all sorts of well-intentioned places. And so a bit of this conversation, it's great to hear that you all feel collectively that you're operating at the right strategic level when it comes to direction, priorities, mission, values. I would put metrics in here. You brought up the conversation about our goals being much more ambitious and the thresholds associated with that. Of course, certainly that's going to be a conversation that we'll want to talk about when Kelly and Rebecca are up here, because we've said we're going to put some big things on the table. We might not hit them, but we hit them. If we get 80%, it's going to be a lot more than what we had done in the previous version. So with this kind of structure in mind, let's just, a couple other questions to tee up the transition to Kelly and Rebecca getting into the plan. And we'll write a few things down. So again, we like to do this. So these are two prompts. Again, we'll write this down because we actually want to have them on the board, because you're going to get a chance to look at the feedback from the last strat plan, things that have changed. What are some questions that we can ask that help us stay at the right altitude? How do we ask those questions in a way that expresses curiosity, direction, and then what are questions and things that we do if maybe we're drifting, and you think about that framework, getting too operational, getting too tactical, if you think that might be the case. I'd love to just get your reactions, and this is more about maybe how you ask questions of cabinet. How do you ask questions of the team in a way that helps them feel like you're operating at that right level? Maybe you feel like you've already got it down, but you're going to get a chance to practice that here in a few minutes.
I think it's basic. Sometimes one of the challenges is that we create a strategic plan, and we go through the exercise, we create it, and then we kind of put it on the shelf. I think one of the ways of asking the question at the right altitude is the constant referring back to what we said was our goals or objectives based on the strategic plan, and referencing back, showing where either projects are referencing back to the strategic plan or policies that are put forth are referencing back. I think the real opportunity as far as moving forward is to keep the goals of the strategic plan ever before the staff and the board, and such that when we get to the end of the strategic planning period, it has not just been something that then we refer back to, but other than that, it's something that's a part of every board meeting or every presentation. There's some reference to how this is achieving the goal or the objective of our plan. I think that has some real benefit to keeping us at the right altitude and focused on what we said were the things that we want to focus on.
We talked about, it's a great point, we talked about that early on, that a good strategic plan is a filter for decision making. And if it's not aligned with your goals, it's not something you should be doing. If it's something you're doing because it's outside the goals, then it better be intentional with a strategy behind it, and so that's a really great comment. Yes.
No, Dana, you can.
You sure?
Yeah.
So I recall that periodically we'd get a presentation on the update of the strategic plan. So I know that we did do that, but I think what Director Williams is alluding to is more of, what's the vision? What are the overall goals and vision? Because I think the presentation seemed very tactical in terms of, were the things that we said we were going to do, did they get done? But I do think that, as part of the agenda or the board packet, some of these, overarching themes that guide the strategic plan that are going to be the filters through which we make decisions, I think it would be really helpful to always have that as part of either the presentation or as part of our meeting.
So keeping that material in front of you,
Yeah.
literally, physically, to be able to have as part of the package every time. Yeah, I think that's great.
I feel like it is helpful to know what the operational plan is that will effectuate the staff's ability to deliver on the strategic planning goals. Certainly, I think to Director Lamont's point, you want to make sure that we understand sort of the vision and context in which the work falls within the strategic plan, but I also would love from the executive team and others to know what are y'all doing in your work streams to actually get us to those outcomes. So I think that would be really instructive. And then, on the finance side, I think Irwin does a really good job of giving us the context of CalHFA's asset, like our ability to be fiscally strong so that we can deliver on our work. And I think that is a really important piece of, so when we go deep on some of that, I actually think that's really instructive for the board. And so, questions around our fiscal health relative to our ability to deliver on the strategic plan goals, our ability to leverage all CalHFA's tools in the toolbox is also something I think this strategic planning process is sort of inviting us to think about, and our new executive director is thinking a lot about that too. But it helps to have a way in which we know how we're actually going to deliver on the strategic plan goals.
Okay.
So as I understand it, and I'm going to frame it that way about my own limited knowledge, CalHFA does not get funding from the state, right? And so I think it is driven.
Sometimes.
Some.
But for the most part, it's driven by right. I meant for staff is driven by transaction. It needs fees to pay for staff. And so all of a sudden we creep into this situation around transactions become more important or more driving for the sustainability of the organization as opposed to a transaction that meets a vision of what CalHFA and we can be doing. And so I feel like that's part of the issue. So yes, we have to be financially strong. And again, I know I've lamented it many times, like when I joined 12 years ago, this agency was financially in trouble, came out of that and because of really thoughtful, intentional, hard work. But now that it's financially strong, there should be intentional decisions about how to invest the dollars to have better outcomes in collaboration with more partners, in collaboration with more than just a housing unit, right? So I feel like that is where we're getting and where we're going to. So, and we have to pay for staff, so transactions matter. But I just feel like there is something bigger and bolder.
I want to clarify, you're talking about sort of transactional details in terms of projects to be able to generate the fees and the cash needed. You want to get to that, or you're saying?
No, I'm saying I sometimes feel like we get so caught up in the transaction because we have to pay. The transactions mean transactions as opposed to having a vision of what's the
Gotcha. So
transformation.
that's kind of the second question about maybe getting too deep into some of those.
So I was going to, on that one, I was going to say, I will stop asking about deferred developer fee, because that's probably, but yeah, no, I feel like where's the right level is for us to, about the vision and transformation of neighborhoods and communities, not necessarily transactions, but I feel like that's where we're always kind of brought back to. And it's important for us to approve budgets and investments, but there's this.
Okay.
And I remember, I thought it was really fun. We had a really robust conversation around income targeting and home ownership versus rental. It was like one of the funnest in 12 years conversations that I was part of at this meet. And I feel like there's something that can happen, and I don't know, I think you're kind of saying, is like, let's figure out some time to actually chew on an issue. I mean, I look around this table and there's so many really smart, important people. It's like, why have them here if you're not going to use them, not just to agree to stuff, which has to happen, but like, why not use them as thought leaders and thought partners? And so to me, that would be the thing we should be doing. And maybe that slides into micromanagement. I hope it doesn't, but.
I'm hearing a little bit, and maybe Kelly, this is the operating too deep or drifting into details. I'm hearing you describe a desire to want to talk about details, but maybe in a setting where that's a reserved topic where we can get into some of the details at a, sounds weird, at a broader level in terms of some of these unique variables that we're talking about, but we don't want to get dragged into a transaction by transaction set of conversations where this board is just approving things at a perfunctory level. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, that sounds like what I'm saying, but I'm a little, I'll have to think about how to say it a little.
Okay. We don't want to capture it, because, and I'm hearing you as well say that this is a diverse group with a lot of background and experience, and talking about the details, wanting to know some of the operations because it helps you serve the agency better, but maybe with just the right format, time, and place. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to piggyback on your point, I think sometimes we're approving transactions and they bring up broader themes that are critical to the housing ecosystem or our crisis at hand. And I almost think there should be a time during our meeting where we can have a discussion about the broader themes. And and in terms of being really cognizant of what our role as board members is, it's I think a conversation about how is the agency thinking about this? We're seeing this pattern. How are we addressing it? And just being curious in that way, but because I do think that sort of discourse is important as a board. But I think sometimes the format of the meetings don't allow for that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So one thing I struggle with sometimes is, this is getting maybe the other side of the equation, like when we have some years ago, the board set the threshold of $15 million. So if the loan commitment was below that, it's just done through the executive director. We discuss the ones that are greater.
Yeah.
But when we do that, we're in effect a loan committee, it feels like to me. And the danger to me in that is like we spend energy and to get into the details of a transaction. I find that helpful in some ways, because in the discussion we had on the 3 loan commitments we made earlier, we raised different issues, to Director Lemone's point, I think. And it was helpful to sort of like generate the question. But the more interesting part of it to me was like the bigger part of that, not the particulars of a given project in Reseda or whatever, as much as that's an important project. So I kind of wonder, like, are we looking through the binoculars the wrong way sometimes? I mean, I wonder, like, should we be spending the time we're spending on a given loan commitment, or maybe that should be something that's done through a separate, like, loan committee if it's a higher risk, like X over X amount, and where the board focuses on, like, are there bigger picture issues that drop out of that we should be paying attention to? I'm kind of grappling with that. I don't have an answer, but I kind of feel like, I wonder if we should be, like, focusing on bigger policy goal objectives, especially under this new configuration we're going to have for the reorganization, and maybe move off the individual loan commitment discussions. I don't have an answer. I'm struggling with that.
It's a great transition to the last set of questions.
There you go.
And let's use it to stay on time. But you're really asking the first part of this, which is, what are the focus areas? Think about the plan that you're getting ready to look at now, all the work you've been doing. You just raised broader themes, mission, vision, values, policy issues, broader themes from a project. Where does this group really want to focus? Is it improving projects, or is it somewhere different? And what does that look like? Because I think that's exactly the question you're asking.
I do think one of the things we want, I can't speak for you all, but one of the things I want to do is focus on certain themes that keep coming up in our meetings. Costs, design. I don't think we do enough to bring that back to the board. And I just named two. There are so many other themes. But we need to kind of get our arms around them because they do come up every meeting. And, you know, we're sitting on some data, some MIP data that could probably pull out some more insight into where we're seeing the market going based on the deals that we're doing. So I think we should listen to ourselves each week and make sure that we bring these in some form in this meeting format or some other format.
So themes, patterns, these recurring issues.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I struggle how we get to those issues without the projects, because I'm a project-based learner, and this is the applied case. So what did we learn from this?
Yeah.
I almost feel like we don't see enough projects. I love going through projects.
Just wait.
Well, because I don't know if we're seeing, I mean, honestly, you've told me the numbers before. How many of all the projects, of all the loans we do, are we actually seeing here? What percentage is that? Is it a quarter, a half, 3/4?
75% of
75%.
the number of projects and approximately 90% of the volume.
Okay, so we are actually taking a pretty good look at stuff. That's reassuring to know. How we would get to having those discussions absent an actual project to look at is hard for me personally from where I sit. I will also say that I also feel very much heard. I had a conversation with a former acting director, to be unnamed, and I could name a board member and she could tell me, here's their issues. This is what they care about. This is what they're going to ask about. And she's not alone in saying that, but she was the one I was talking to at the time. That made me feel very much heard and very much like that these discussions don't go unremarked upon.
So I want to just interject. This may be a case of be careful what you wish for, because if you look at the strategic plan, we'll get into this, that to increase, for example, our asset base by 50% by the end of the 3 years.
Are we looking at more?
That means a lot. If you add in construction lending, which is something under kind of, that's, I mean, there's like, I think there'll have to be some, we need to figure out how we grapple with that if indeed this great staff team and the other members of the housing consortium kick this thing into gear. I mean, it'll lurch forward. So I think we want to think about how we best approach all that. I know, I kind of like debate this too myself, which is that looking at a given transaction loan commitment is helpful. It generates questions in my head, but that could become overwhelming. I just want to put that out there.
I wonder if we think about kind of a consent calendar model where, you know, projects kind of go on consent. We get the board packet, we review them. Things that we want to talk more about could be pulled. I mean, depending on the volume, I think that could be a structure that could then allow for room to have more of the topical themed strategic conversations, because I do think that this board represents really deep knowledge and perspective that is not always applied both in our conversations and doesn't necessarily give guidance to how the staff should be thinking about the industry problems. I mean, I would love for CalHFA to opine on some of these issues and give direction, frankly, statewide, nationally, even other CalHFA or other HFAs. So I feel like they aren't mutually exclusive. I think that there's maybe a design question about how to organize our time together in board meetings to maybe capture both opportunities.
Yeah. Go ahead, Director
But I think there have been meetings that, we fly in here, and they're very short meetings, that we could have had a discussion. And, myself speaking, we're flying from San Diego, the other side of the state. Let's just take advantage of the time that we're here. So when it's a short meeting, I think we should just add on an additional time for discussion to talk about these broader themes.
I think, back to the issue of whether we, approving projects, CalHFA is a lender. We ought to be reviewing projects and discussing. That's where these conversations and issues come out. I think what the real challenge is that where we try to establish policy or incentive based on what we've discussed, how do you communicate that out? Just today, we talked about the issue of transit-oriented development and parking. We've had the discussion in here, but by the time a project comes to us, it's baked.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, it's done. Our responsibility at that point is not to be an architectural review committee, because our opinions and values and perspectives won't be given back to the developer and say, okay, now you've got to go back and redesign your project based on a conversation that happened at CalHFA. By then, the ship has sailed. So I think one of the opportunities in our strategic plan and talking about being a leader is having our issues or our concerns or our perspectives broadcast throughout the state so that developers understand if you want to go to CalHFA to get MIP or any kind of funding, these are the items that you need to take into consideration at the planning stage of your project. Not when you're coming here, 30 days from construction start. And I think that that's an opportunity where our voices and our opinions, we need to look at how can we put that out there early so that what those things are that we raise are given consideration at the early stages of a project plan and can impact and influence how developers approach project design if they're going to come to us for funding. I think that's the hammer and leverage that we have beforehand, not when it comes into the room, because it's already done by then. And I think that under our strategic plan, being able to promote those issues early on is a real opportunity that maybe hasn't been experienced as great as it could be. Because I think we do have leverage, but not by the time it's on the agenda for funding.
So I just totally agree with you, Mr. Williams. And I feel, we've never voted no, right? In the 12 years, I've never seen a project get a no vote. And I do feel like staff listens to what is said, so I do believe that. But there should be, at some level, it should be, I want to figure out how to say the tail wagging the dog within this, but there's something about, we should be, we're the ones with the dollars and the expertise at some level to help drive what is the right kind of community solution. And maybe that's a little too patronizing, that we know better than what LA knows or something like that. I was just thinking about whoever approved that design. But I do feel like there's something we should be doing within it. And I do feel like that happens long before the project comes to us to vote on. And actually, it happens probably long before someone comes to even apply for the funding. But I totally agree. You said much more passionately than I could have and more succinctly, but I totally agree.
I want to keep us on time because we're going to get to the rest of it, but go ahead, sir, for the last.
So I wonder if,
Bless you.
if we don't spend enough time on the term sheet, like the MIP term sheet, for example, or the other program, that to me is the key. So as opposed to that's the front end, the back end is the transactions. And to Director Lemon's point, I kind of cringe sometimes when we've got a short board meeting, because I know we got people coming up who are taking chunks of their day out or whole day. And because we have to approve this loan commitment. Because if we don't, then bad things start to happen. So we're part of that critical path, and it just has to happen. We're sorry, we only had 2 loan commitments, so you're here for like an hour and a half, and, you know, I don't like that.
I'm hearing a making space for the patterns and themes
Yeah.
conversation in a
Yeah.
way. We didn't talk as much about goals and metrics, but
Right.
that'll come up in terms of, are we
Yeah.
making progress in the
Because
development?
sometimes there are other things that are bigger picture that aren't fully baked, where it feels like you'd be jamming it into a given board meeting to, where it really should come up at a subsequent one, but we have to have this given board meeting because we have to clear these loan commitments. You know, it's just kind of the way it's set up here right now.
That and also the role that we're playing in the government ecosystem, or just the all of government discourse around housing. You know, how, especially with the new agency, you know, what are all the various agencies that are represented within this room? How, you know, what role are we playing in the common goals that we have as a state? And what are the learnings that we all have? How are we sharing those learnings? I think that's also a very important discussion.
Great. There was one other question. I'm going to skip it just because it's about accountability and we'll spend a long time there. So I want to get Rebecca up here to actually give you a chance to practice all these things in the context of the new plan. So that was a great discussion. Thank you for the time up here. It's been great to support this team. Rebecca, you ready? All right.
Good afternoon, Rebecca Franklin, Chief Deputy Director. Oh,
I just want to pause for 1 second. For public comment on this item, that would be kind of towards when we finish our discussion.
Yeah, you can finish this.
Looking at council here.
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Still Rebecca, still here. No, it's fine. Gonna move to, I don't want to see my face though, still. Okay. Okay. As we have, I think, ad nauseum for the last 3 years described the framework in which we do strategic planning and business planning, I'm going to kind of go quick. If there are questions, please, I will take them after this slide. So CalHFA does its overall business planning in 2 different segments. One is a strategic plan that's forward-looking, that's future-focused, that allows us to kind of set those big, ostentatious goals that require multiple years to obtain, right? We can't obtain 50% growth in a year, but we can try to do it in 50 years. Sorry, in 3 years. We could try to do it in 50 years. That actually would be not a very goal. So that's kind of there. We started with the vision and mission. We did redo that. We do acknowledge the board's feedback of we shouldn't have to be redoing the mission and vision every time. There was a newish director that had come on board and was like, do you guys redo this every year? What are you guys doing? And it's just, CalHFA looks, acts, and is operating in a system that looks dramatically different than it did even 3 to 5 years ago, even when I started at CalHFA. And so we needed to kind of re-identify ourselves. We needed to bring ourselves back together. And we needed to bring the executive team back together and center ourselves. Executive directors are all going to have their own vision of what we do, of what they want to achieve in that seat. But what we do as CalHFA kind of needs to stay current or consistent throughout the kind of leadership team at the executive level. But we have changed. That kind of, we are still delivering financial solutions. That's still our lane. But we needed to look at that as how we're doing that, or what is the vision we're trying to achieve. Because as the feedback the board was giving in the last segment of this item was that we don't want you to be rubber stamping. We want you guys to bring in your expertise. I think I've shared many of times, this is my 4th board, and I've worked under lay boards. Very fun, try to set a discount rate. But this is very different. This is very encouraging because you guys all have such in-depth knowledge and expertise that you're bringing to the table. And so we needed to bring ourselves together and recenter ourselves. And with Tony coming on board and him having such a strong, clear vision of where we needed to be and how we needed to show up and where we wanted to go, we felt like this was a needed exercise for us to do. So when we did the vision and mission, it wasn't just looking at words on a piece of paper. It really was a team building event for the executive team. It was resetting the culture. It was redefining who we are, how we want to show up, how we want to show up in the ecosystem we keep talking about, because that has changed. It has changed dramatically. Seeing ourselves as one of the many pieces, not only in the state housing continuum, but also like the state administration housing, but in the larger picture with localities, with nonprofits, et cetera. And so we wanted to make sure, Tony, mostly because he's the boss, but I think I a little bit wanted to make sure that the executive team, the people that are leading our people, the leadership team that's setting the tone and tenor for everyone else was aligned in that. And that's what that mission and vision activity was for us. So we started there, and then we defined strategic goals. We heard you when you said, we get that you do financial solutions. That is the most cold statement I've ever heard when you are delivering the best, most warm product to human beings. We heard that. So we didn't change the vision and mission. I'm going to be very transparent with you, because it was very important to the executive team who wrote and created that together that we wanted to keep that. What we did instead is we looked at the vision and mission and we humanized the goals. We took the language of that vision and mission and rewrote the goals and reused the language there and kind of made it more encompassing. And you'll see, I'm going to leave you in suspense, or you could flip a page. But either way, you know, and we humanized those goals. And so we heard what you said. We applied it a little differently, and I hope that you guys can respect that. But we did hear you, and we wanted to reflect it a little bit differently. So the 3-year plan, so the plan that will stay in place for 3 years is mission and vision shall not be touched for a long time. And then the 3-year plan that will stay is the strategic goals, the metrics, which define, did we achieve the goal? And then we've added this capability. And we've actually, what you guys were talking about when you were talking about hearing what we're doing or how we're getting there, those are really a lot about the capabilities that we need. What do we need to put in place, or what do we have in place that we need to maintain to get the work done? What processes, what people, what knowledge base and skills? And that's dynamic, right? That's going to change over time. It's going to be there. Technology evolves, generations evolve, people's needs evolve, the marketplace evolves. So that's the capabilities. So those will stay for 3 years. And then we have the 1-year plan, which is what you have not seen, which are those initiatives. So the initiatives will change annually, but the 3-year plan are the goals, the measures, and the capabilities. Are there any questions on the structure? Good. No, I didn't make lemon bars.
We'll see the 1-year goals soon.
The 1 year is in this presentation. I just like to build it up, you know, suspense. Okay, so So the next slide is the vision and mission, which I transparently said has not changed. So the vision, every Californian can build a thriving life in a stable home. The mission, delivering reliable financing solutions to advance housing opportunities for Californians. So the goals is where we kind of, I guess I was saying humanize. I don't know how you want to describe it, but. That's a good way.
Humanize it? Okay, we humanized it.
Yeah, with a focus on who we're serving and the ultimate impact that we're having, who that's happening to.
You know, when we talk about Dream for All, this is a dream that people have worked their whole life that they get to achieve. There are new homeowners in the state, and we wanted, I like to say warm hug because I like Olaf, but you know, we wanted that warm hug feeling in this because that's what we do. That's the pleasure of, that's the great opportunity that we get to have when we work for this company. And that's what a lot of us are, why we're here, is we get that opportunity, that someone that maybe didn't have a stable living opportunity gets that, or maybe they get to achieve that dream of owning a home.
a gathering place for their families. So the 3 goals are not changed in like the essence, but in the verbiage. So the first goal is advance housing opportunities, help more Californians access safe, stable homes by expanding programs and funding innovation. The second goal is expand partnerships for thriving communities, build thriving communities by working with our government partners to make housing easier to create access. And the third goal is efficiently deliver reliable financing solutions, create simpler paths to reliable financing solutions by modernizing processes and building an empowered, high-performing workforce. So this is just the high level of the goals. We're gonna go through each of the goals and the initiatives that we have later on. So if there's any like initial reaction to the verbiage of the goals, I can do that now, or you can wait until we get into the initiatives. Okay, I see confusion and somewhat happy faces, so we're gonna move on. Okay, so I'm gonna have, yay, thank you, I love that. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. Great, so for the remainder of this presentation, each goal is gonna have 2 slides. So on this first slide, what you'll see is the goal on the left-hand side, the metric, how we're measuring success for that, and then the capabilities. Again, those internal skills or strengths that we need to either build or maintain. In the second slide is where you'll see the 1-year annual initiatives. So that'll be coming. So again, each goal will have 2 slides. So feel free if you have questions, you can ask them, you can discuss things at any time, but recognize that there's more information coming on this particular goal. So looking at this first goal around advancing housing opportunities, I think Rebecca talked a little bit about how we changed this goal up to be a warmer hug, more humanizing. Other things that have changed in this goal based on board feedback, when we had our last workshop, we heard from the board that the plan felt too heavily weighted on financial sustainability over just simply building more housing. And so one of the things that's happened with this goal is we've actually removed financial sustainability as a component so that we can focus exclusively on housing production within this goal. We've relocated financial sustainability. So it hasn't gone away. It's just found a new home under our third goal, which is more focused on operations, where it really actually has a nice natural fit. That's where strong systems, good data, transparent processes, empowered workforce all naturally support that financial sustainability. Let's see. Moving into the metrics, the multifamily program metric and the single family program metric, we did review both of those together at the last workshop. So those do remain unchanged since the last workshop, but I want to provide a little bit more context to the board about the nature of these goals. So if we look at our goal for multifamily programs, we want to develop and deploy programs that support the multifamily housing production, accounting for 50% of the state's private activity bonds. So what does that actually mean? The size of the private activity bonds in California as it stands now is roughly around $5 billion. Currently, CalHFA is doing just under $500 million. Okay, so if we're wanting to get to 50% of this market, we're aiming for $2.5 billion. We're looking to go from a little under $500 million now to $2.5 billion over the course of 3 years. And if you're saying, wow, that sounds ambitious, we heard you, that we should be more ambitious, and I want to acknowledge that it is. That's going, from 10% to 50%, it's a five-fold increase. So this is definitely not a layup or a metric we'll trip over by getting there. It's probably not even a three-pointer. It might be more of a half-court shot, but we do have some initiatives lined up that we feel really confident in terms of helping us stair-step to get there.
We have a team full of Steph Curry, so we know you'll make the half-court shot.
Exactly. Thank you, Director Prince. Great. And then in terms of our single-family program.
I'm sorry, if I could just pause for a second, because I kind of want this one to sink in. I mean, as I began to understand better, I think the metrics we set for us in the plan we're ending, the more I understood it or figured it out, the more underwhelmed I got. And I think this is 50% over the 3-year time span.
That's correct.
It's a lot. I think under the current plan, the metric would have been more like 15%. So, so over a 3-year time frame, if I got that right, 5% per year.
It was 5.
5 per year, but. you
5
said
per year,
for 3 years.
15%.
No, it was 5 total.
Yeah.
Oh, it was 5.
5 total, even more underwhelming. So I think this is rather bold.
Yeah.
Not rather bold, it's bold. And so I think that's part of what my personal take on this, I love this. We may not get there because there's a lot that needs to work in our favor, but I think we just want to try to push the envelope because all that translates into being, in the end, in my mind, and we'll get to the asset base later, the more we have there, the more we can start to redeploy back into housing.
For sure.
I think that, to me, is the holy grail.
Yeah, and
Is part of it.
so the last strategic plan we did, it was the first time we had done the strategic plan concept of the 3-year versus like an annual business plan that we were just doing over an annual, like every year. So it was a learning process for all involved, and the 5% was, a layup, to keep the metaphor going, I guess. I don't really play basketball, so it's really squeaky for me. But their shoes are really squeaky on the floor. We get that. But I think what had happened in the way we reported it in the interaction between staff and the board, or at least for me in my experience, was there was a lot of trust built. In government sometimes, I think the unfortunate thing is, we're in positions sometimes for short tenures, or we have tenures. And we want to, show progress tomorrow. And that sometimes limits people's ability to make these really big goals because you may fail and that may happen. But what happened, the beauty of the last plan was we didn't hit all of our goals. But we came to you and we talked about it and we were transparent and you guys understood. And and the next step was we probably could have brainstormed about what we could do and talk about it. You guys offered we could change the goal, so you could hit it. And we said, no, we don't want to change the goal. We just want to be accountable for what it is. And so in that positive interaction, when we didn't hit the goal, you guys, I hope, trusted us that we were being transparent when we didn't, and we explained why. But then that allowed for us to be more comfortable to say, okay, we're going to really put this out here, we're going to really make that. Also, my boss wanted to set the goal there, so, yeah.
If I may, no, I appreciate everything you said. I think some of the comments here are pre-setting up excuses for if we don't meet this goal, and I fully plan on meeting this goal. I think that it is ambitious, but I think with the resources that CalHFA has access to, with some of the restructuring that's going on at the state level, and with the people that we're bringing into CalHFA to support these initiatives, I think it is something that is ambitious yet fully attainable within a 3-year period. And so it's something that I've worked closely with Catherine on, and we're on the same page. Of course, there are hurdles, and it's not going to be easy, but we're fully we're all in to make this happen.
Great.
Great. To keep us moving, where we left off was looking at our single-family programs metric. Again, just a bit of context around this metric. We're saying that by the end of 3-year period, we'd like to have 5% of the single-family lending portfolio supporting new supply. Context, again, right now, in a technical sense, it's 0%. We don't have a single-family lending program that is specifically focused on incentivizing new supply. There could be some challenges here, like resources may be the biggest challenge we face in achieving this particular goal. But again, we have a lot of excitement and eagerness to see what we can do and what we can accomplish on that front in the next 3 years.
And
Finally,
Oh,
go ahead.
I'll follow you, sir.
Okay. If I could interject, I mean, the question I had on this is like, God, 5% doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. But I think I get it in that we need to stand up something new.
Yes.
And so you got to, in a market where there's all these other players out there, so it's like, okay, I get that. We got to get to a proof of concept.
Yeah.
So I can see this. So if we can get to a proof of concept where we can make a meaningful addition, and the next go round is 5%, maybe it's 25 or 50, I don't know. But we got to get somewhere, and I think that's what we're trying to do in this. That was my takeaway on this.
Yeah, so I'm building upon that, because I find it to be really interesting to think about. What I don't know is what's the number of sales that happen every year that are resales, if that's the right word, versus new units. And therefore, is 95% of all sales already happening throughout the state are, and I guess I'm talking about just in general, you would know these answers, I have no idea. Like, and therefore, like, are we grabbing like kind of a proration, the right, is 5% the right number based upon the volume of new sales within the overall sales? I also think about so many different opportunities to work with developers right from the very beginning, if there is a product, right? So I think that I agree, it's about opening up that door and creating that kind of, creating the path for the success, right? Creating the mechanisms. And then the last thing is, I'm just really glad you're talking about new production, right? Because we're not going to solve the housing crisis of California without new production, right? And so I feel like this is a great, great step towards that overall goal. So I liked it. As much as and my knowledge of homeownership is this, so I'm just going to defer everything to you.
No, I just want to acknowledge that the challenges behind creating these products are pretty substantial. And so, I mean, there's a reason why there isn't a proliferation of for sale funding mechanisms out there in the market nationwide. So I think 5% is correct. I think we need a proof of concept, and that is going to be huge. And that, I think, will set, if we figure this out, it's going to set a ripple effect on not only California, but the rest of the nation. So I think I'm really good with, more than good with that goal.
Thank you,
So
Director.
can I ask about the use of language here? Because we talked about multifamily or single family, and are we talking about apartments and for sale? It's because single family is not the only for sale product that might exist.
I think that's right. I think we might want to change that to homeownership or other, a different.
That'd be expansive, that would be all inclusive. Thank you.
Hopefully we figure out condo defect liability.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah.
Sorry.
If that gets solved. But I think that's important. And to the larger point about the 5%, I think we're not looking at, as Kelly mentioned, essentially, we're looking at creating programs that are directly incentivizing new supply. And so we don't want it to detract from our current first-time homebuyer program, which are working well. But we do want to add additional things that are really incentivizing that building of entry-level supply.
10,000%. I'm a bad mathematician.
And you're right, to the point, that could be, standalone single-family homes, it could be, townhomes, it could be condos. We really, that entry-level homeownership is really what we're focused on.
Great, thank you. And then just to round out this slide, in terms of the capabilities, for this plan, our leadership team identified 5 in total that we felt would be needed to support the various goals of this strategic plan. Not all of the 5 will always apply to every goal, but in this instance, being that it is a very ambitious goal and focused very much again on advancing those housing opportunities, the thing that we are here to do in California, it will take all 5 of the capabilities we identified, including financial expertise, product design, and optimization. How do we know when a product that we've developed is working and doing well, or maybe not and needing to be sunset, right? Really optimizing what our portfolio mix is. In addition to collaboration, our own operational effectiveness, and team development. So all 5 of the capabilities that we identified overall, we recognize are going to be needed to achieve this particular goal.
I've got a question on that, particularly with the 1.5 billion under the multifamily program. Has there, and I know we're working through the strategic plan, but are we staffed You know, what will it take to go from where we are to 2.5 billion?
We'll be back in June.
Okay.
No, I will say that we have been having those budget discussions about building out, not just for the next year, but over the future years, over the strategic plan, to make sure that we're in place by year 3 to meet these goals.
I think also you'll see in goal 3, where it's going to be both looking at our processes and making sure they're the most efficient, as well as a staffing component. And I think Erwin and I will be back in June. We'll tag team that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
So moving forward, now we'll go ahead and take a look at the actions that we'll be undertaking, or we're proposing to undertake, to deliver on our goal of advancing housing opportunities. First, initiatives to develop new home ownership supply programs and scale employer-based down payment assistance will expand that product suite and the partnerships needed to make progress towards that single-family metric of ensuring that 5%, of our portfolio is supporting that new supply. And likewise, initiatives such as developing a new construction loan product and implementing preservation financing tools will directly support the multifamily production metric by increasing CalHFA's ability to fill financing gaps and help bring more projects to completion. So for us, especially under this goal, success looks like us putting forward comprehensive and market-filling products that we are operating in such a way that it's coordinated and very reliable execution, and that our actions and activities are supporting affordability and the longevity of those affordable properties. Are there any questions in particular about these set of initiatives?
No.
Great, if more come up, don't worry, we'll have time. But this takes us into our second goal. The second goal is around expanding partnerships for thriving communities. We want to build thriving communities by working with our government partners to make housing easier to create and access. Now, I do want to acknowledge that at the last workshop, we did hear feedback from the board encouraging us to consider partnerships beyond government. And I just want to point out that, by making choosing to focus on government partners here in this plan, it's not meant to be exclusionary of any other partners. Okay, but given the context of the moment that we find ourselves in, where a lot is changing, particularly in California's housing ecosystem, we want to purposefully be strategically focused here on our government partners and ensuring that we're working well with those partners. When it comes moving forward to the metrics, the first and second metric remain largely unchanged from the last time we reviewed them at the workshop. So I want to call attention mostly to this third metric around our local metric, which is increasing partnerships with local governments and housing authorities to support production through joint investments. When we met back in February, our goal earmarked that of a figure of at least $100 million. Staff took a look at the historical averages over the last 7 years and determined that a more ambitious level would be to set that at $500 million. And that's a level of investment that we want to reach in an annual year by year 3. Mr. Prince, Mr. Williams, we heard you.
It is wonderful.
And again, I think it's important to give the board context here. So like I said, we looked at the last approximately 7 years of our data. Our average annual joint investment is around $160 million. However, last year our joint investment in this area was at $215 million. So again, we're going to be working over the course of the next 3 years to reach a $500 million level in a single year. And really what that represents, just to give you, again, context and scale, that $215 million that we did last year, that represented about 5 projects. So to be at that $500 million range, we're talking more like 14, 15 projects that we would be working on. Great, and then in terms of the capabilities needed.
Before you move on,
Yes.
so I think goal 1, if that's metric 1, I feel like that's a little, it's a layup almost, since there's so much work happening, if that's the right way. I mean, there's a lot happening there, but I think it's broader, it's part of a broader thing that is not a layup, which is like, how can there be the alignment at the, within the state that really drives cost-effective building, alternative construction methodologies? I don't know what the right thing is, but drives down costs that then leads to more production, right? The idea of shortening up the time frame from a single application is ease, right, to lower time of construction or development, and therefore would lower interest rates and lower costs nominally, right? I mean, there's something there. So it's really about what's all of the things that's really kind of a component of. And so I'm totally happy with this, but I just feel like it's kind of one step of a bigger collaboration that's happening at the state level. It's also about how do you get down to that deeper affordability in a cost-effective way. I mean, we see all kinds of issues with services and the sustainability of PSH or housing serving very vulnerable populations. So it's also, to me, it's about all of those collaborations that make those, as it says, thriving communities. It's not just about the development, but it's also about the future.
Yeah, so you're looking at it from the perspective of the partners coming together to really drive down the cost.
Drive down
Therefore
costs.
enabling more.
Yeah.
Right.
Ensure sustainability, to think about how do we get down to the most vulnerable in an effective way. Yeah, I mean, it's good, but I feel like there's something more that you all can be doing.
To piggyback on Director Prince, I like the flow of the metrics. I do believe there is one metric not there, number 4. Stay with me here.
I was just making sure, actually, I didn't, I thought there wasn't 4.
Just piggybacking on Director Prince, I think this strategic plan with these metrics will give us an opportunity to perfect working with these partners, because I don't think we have perfected it. So Director Prince brought up some very detailed items that we should look at. And so I see us perfecting this as we achieve the goals. Once we do that, I'd like to see this number 4 or have that conversation around non-municipal partnerships. And I'll leave it at that.
I mean, are you talking about in the next phase?
So in the next.
Okay.
So I'm not saying introduce
In
number 4.
respect to Mr. Prince's comments, did you want to say, I let you talk first? Okay. I would say, I guess, having on the other side of AB 2006 and AB 519 working groups and the people executing those, our intention is to do what you said, but that is taking it is a giant lift from a coordination factor for these major groups, right? So coordinating in a single application, or 2006 where we had to break down between ourselves, the treasurer's office and HCD on, what items do each of us need from an asset management compliance perspective, who's going to do what. We actually were changing over to the Inspire method at the same time. Those are, they're not overnight discussions, and I understand that we're driving to that outcome, and I understand where you're coming from, the measure part of it. I guess I'm trying to say I get it sounds like a qualitative measure, but this does represent many staff hours of effort, and to make sure that these outcomes, this single application happens, 2006 continues to evolve and really truly make good on what that legislation's goals are. I think holding us accountable to making sure we continue down that path, maybe I respect your comments and am more than willing to accept them if you would like, but I'm trying to give you a different point of view. From
It is not the first time where I think something should just be easy and done, and let's move on to the next one. So I totally appreciate that there's a lot more behind that than I know. So I totally.
Because it's both, they're 2 different technology systems, et cetera. I mean, I will.
No, I just, I am of your mindset generally, and I know I've talked to the secretary a lot about this as well, that we all want and think it should be easier to accomplish some of these outcomes than it often is. One of the things that because I think your overall objectives of getting more out of the state funding and the federal funding and getting more housing, more affordability, is the larger goal of this reorganization, is the larger goal of what we're trying to do at the state. What we're trying to do here is.
We spoke about that the other day.
What we're trying to do here is focus on CalHFA's role within that larger infrastructure and what we have more direct control over. I do think that the goals here are less ambitious than they are in the first one, but these are necessary in order to accomplish the goals. I mean, the metrics on the first goal. We will have to do these things as well. We will have to streamline our state operations. We will have to create better partnerships. And that includes non-municipal partnerships. In order to meet our lending goals, nothing we do alone. Everything we're doing is with partnerships, whether it's public or private, or most of the time both. This goal here was really about things that I think CalHFA has not done as well in the past. We bring you developments with private partners, private banks, private contractors all the time. What we have not done as well is partnering with our state partners, partnering with our local partners, and building the tribal partnerships out that we can to really move that forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this goal and metrics tend to be a bit more qualitative because but it is essential in order to deliver on the quantitative goals that we have in the first goal. So I can't underscore how important CalHFA's role is in not only sort of maximizing CalHFA's toolbox, but integrating that into the other state departments and resources that we have, and that is new for us. Yep. And I think over the 3-year period is essential to grow so that we can ultimately meet our number one goal around housing production.
Yeah. And if I could interject, I like the way it's framed here, because I think we've got to make this new arrangement work.
Yeah. There's
been a lot of time, political capital, energy invested in sort of realigning the state's housing approach, and I think we want this to succeed. When I came on the board, I think there was a view, not universally here at CalHFA, but we're kind of like we're on our own. I think there's been a real shift in that, which is like, how do we collaborate with our partner state agencies to deliver for Californians? And so I think, there's others in this room, like the secretary and our executive director, I understand this much better than I do, but I don't want to downplay it's a lift. But we got to get there. And in the time frame of the strategic plan, if we can get there, it's going to be just better outcomes, I think, in terms of what we can deliver. And we're better for it as CalHFA.
Thank you. This has all been a really great discussion. I've really enjoyed this process with the board as we've been developing the strategic plan over these last few months, almost a year, I guess, at this point. But there's one more note I just want to acknowledge around the tribal metric. Focusing on increasing our coordination and establishing that relationship with the tribes was a big focus of this current strategic plan. It's carrying forward into this next strategic plan. We do have a metric there and a hope of being able to develop at least one new product. But what I want to say is that it's really important to us to make sure that this is responsive to tribal needs. And so really, first and foremost, there's going to be a lot of continued engagement and meeting the tribes where they're at, really understanding what their specific needs are, seeing where there's maybe opportunity to tweak an existing product or develop a new one that does suit what their specific needs are. So it's not an instance where, we have this metric up and we're going to do whatever it takes just to have one new product out there. We want to make sure that it is responsive to their actual needs. And then closing this goal out, The capabilities we identified needed to achieve this goal certainly should have been listed first. Collaboration is a huge one, but also, again, product design and optimization. That comes to play when we're thinking about developing that tribal product. And again, operational effectiveness. If we're looking to reduce the time from application to award for these multifamily projects, that is going to require a high degree of efficiency within our systems. And also our own team development, our own leadership development within CalHFA as we're interacting with our partners to make sure that we are meeting folks at the table with the best versions of ourselves and hopefully collaborating with ease.
Kelly, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Not just about these capabilities, but the capability component. Do you all feel like you have all the capabilities within your current workforce? Or is there thinking about contracting, new staff, trainings? Is that going to be in the third goal?
That's a great question. And yes, I thought about that. But
Like, I might be early. It's possible.
well, what I want to note too is that, for some of these capabilities, we identified them as a team, as a strength that we already have. And we wanted to call specific attention to it to make sure we don't lose that. We need to work to maintain it. All those gains in the gym go away the minute you start going to the gym. So we need to make sure that we're still exercising those skills. Right?
When you stop going to the gym.
Gym's next door.
Exactly. You can put it on your way out after this meeting. But, to your point, there are some that we identified that we know we have opportunity to grow. And so you will see in our third goal where there's, a training metric that has now integrated a specific focus on developing out some of those capabilities. And we've already, the plan hasn't been adopted or in effect, but it influences the way that we are thinking about training opportunities looking ahead. Facilitation trainings that could make us really skilled at collaborating with our government partners, things like that. And using, again, those capabilities as a decision-making tool in terms of where to invest our time or our resources to grow.
I think you'll see that in the June item, especially with the operational budget. We've, I think one of the great things, Tony's done a lot of great things since he's come on board, but like one of the best things I think from my personal experience is that he has a renewed energy and focus around training and developing staff. I think, Secretary, you highlighted it in our last time we had spoken about the plan, and I think it's really reflective in the budget. I mean, not only have we dedicated a lot of dollars to our training line items, but we recognize that we're going to need to bring in outside consultation. All of our contracts, though, have knowledge transfer provisions because our current general counsel is a, what is it called? Intellectual property guru, ninja protector. So she makes sure all of that is very rock solid. So we do recognize, and you will see reflected in the budget, maybe some increased line items than before. We will be asking for larger headcount to, more programs, et cetera. We're trying to be very mindful and strategic about it, but we're also looking to modernize our systems, not replacing anybody, but, replacing that mundane work where all those errors occur and just going faster. And you'll see that reflected in some of the metrics in the goal 3, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
Did you say guru, ninja, rock star?
Yeah. I mean, have you met Claire?
She's very kind.
Great. So moving forward into the actions that we'll undertake to deliver on this second goal of expanding partnerships for thriving communities. Collectively, these initiatives are what are going to help, convert these goals into some kind of measurable throughput and co-investment. So they collectively aim to tighten up governance, align actors early, and remove friction so that the state, tribal, and local metrics move in the right direction together. Standing up the HDFC Executive Committee will formalize cross-agency governance and shared processes, enabling faster, streamlined decisions, which is precisely what's needed to make progress on our state metric to reduce application times. The early coordination model within the tribal initiative will aim to bring tribes, lenders, developers, state partners, and localities together at the start of program and project development to help build trust, reduce barriers, and create, hopefully, a pathway for which this group of people can help be responsive around a new tribal product, responsive to their housing priorities and needs. And finally, targeted support for housing authorities will help increase our deal flow and expand that co-investment activity, which will, again, directly contribute to advancing our local partnerships metric. Success in this goal, as the Secretary Moss alluded to, is somewhat qualitative over quantitative, but it will hopefully look like unified government action, accelerated and very efficient progress, and an expansion of our partnerships and a deepening of those partnerships for impact. Right, moving forward into our third and final goal. This goal is around efficiently delivering reliable financing solutions. We're focused here on creating simpler paths to reliable financing solutions by modernizing our processes internally and building an empowered and high-performing workforce. You'll note, again, we've referenced this a couple of times, but at that last board workshop, we did hear from the board that the plan had felt too heavily weighted on financial sustainability. So this is representing us moving that financial sustainability focus into more of the operations goal. So the metric around financial sustainability and portfolio resilience is now residing under this goal instead of that first goal that was around production. Let's see, and beyond that, the metrics largely remain unchanged except for their placement in the plan. Again, we relocated that financial sustainability and portfolio metric, and then made a slight update to the training metric to include a focus on building and strengthening our capabilities. The final change that I want to call out is that we had heard some feedback that some of the metrics in this category originally may not be fully representative of success. And in fact, I think that might have come from you, Secretary Moss. And so I think that was mainly focused on us including a metric around our Great Place to Work survey and the sentiments of our staff. So we heard that, and while that metric remains important to us on many levels and we'll continue to track our progress in the Great Place to Work survey, it's not represented here in the strategic plan anymore, and instead we've focused in on training and what it is to really grow, develop, and empower our staff. So setting up some context for these metrics with that first metric on financial sustainability and portfolio resistance. We talked a little bit about this in the beginning with Chair Cervantes, but increasing the agency's assets by at least 50% is a big increase. The last plan, as we noted at the start of this presentation, was 5% over a 3-year period. We're pushing now for 50% over a 3-year period. Our current assets are somewhere in the neighborhood of $5.4 billion. And so we will be aiming for $8 billion, again, by the end of this 3-year strategic plan. We're also currently at a double, I'm gonna look at Erwin here, double A plus rating. So, we talk about maintaining at least a AA rating here in this metric, and I think what we wanna acknowledge is that we're willing to undertake some amount of risk in order to grow our book of business here and be ambitious, but we wanna be mindful that we're not stretching so far across that line that it would start to impact that rating in a severe way and bring that down.
I wanted to add on the rating. We did meet with Moody's. Erwin, when did we meet? A month ago. Erwin obviously is the details guy of this whole agency. And they had offered to come in and educate the board on the rating. And I think that would be an amazing opportunity. I assumed Chair Cervantes would be the most excited, but and educate the board on the rating because it's a scorecard and we talk about all these ratios. And so I think that would be an amazing opportunity for the board. And so we're going to look to bring that as like a workshop learning opportunity for the board. And, if you know the rating system, then obviously it would be maybe a reminder for that. So this metric will then even be a little bit more impactful, I think, and then we can all be operating from the same, source of information because it is a complex it's not just, one or two ratios, it's kind of a holistic look at things. And so we'll have some representatives from Moody's come in and you guys can dialogue with them. So we're excited about that opportunity.
And I think the part on this I like, it's the lift to grow that balance sheet, because that, again, translates into more we can do on the housing front. But the yin and yang of our operation is sort of like credit quality of the portfolio too. So keeping that AA bracket rating as a proxy for credit quality, so we don't get out over our skis by expanding the portfolio with loans that maybe are inappropriate for us. I think that's the balancing act here. So I kind of like the way you framed it with both elements.
Thank you. Great, and then the capabilities needed to help reinforce and support success within this goal that we identified, certainly continued strength in financial expertise, but in collaboration, I think that's more focused from an internal perspective, and within and amongst our own divisions. That sort of speaks, certainly to our third metric here on systems and improving our workflows together within the division to reduce, the time from application to final approval on some of these multifamily projects. But also, again, operational effectiveness in our own team development fall under this as well.
Before you move to the, I want to highlight how important the word is reliable. Because when developers are putting together deals, oftentimes that's 2 to 3 years away from coming and asking for financing. And so whether we're talking about whatever product that's going to enhance and impact our metrics around multifamily or home ownership, if we're talking about developers, the fact that they can know as they're planning their financing structure for proposed projects, that these products that we have will be there when they finally get to putting together the financing stack is absolutely critical to production, regardless of whether it's home ownership or multifamily, and that we are reliable will continue to make the difference in the production and delivery of housing at every level.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Okay, so that'll bring us into how will we be delivering on Goal 3? What actions are we going to take here? Collectively, what I want to say about these initiatives is that they create this operational backbone for our goal of effectively delivering these reliable financing solutions. Streamlined workflows, modernized systems, data-driven tools, and a highly capable workforce is what will enable CalHFA to continually be reliable in delivering those solutions in a fast and effective way that's also aligned with the agency's long-term success. The initiative to launch a multifamily operations and workflow optimization program across CalHFA teams supports this goal by streamlining our processes and improving coordination, removing bottlenecks that we may have internally, right? So we have a wonderful multifamily division, but they're not the only actors within CalHFA that are helping to pull these projects together. So really looking at how are all of the actors involved within our own agency aligned and working together in ways that we can potentially improve our own ways of working together. So that we can have a more efficient deal flow and faster production cycles. Similarly, the initiative to procure and implement a unified end-to-end lending platform helps to establish a single source of truth for data for multifamily lending and compliance, which directly impacts and improves our reliability, accuracy, and transparency in our program execution. Initiatives that are focused on the investment in our people and capacity building are equally as important. The initiative to develop and deliver a CalHFA-specific training program aligns staff development with operational needs, and these efforts really reinforce our training metric, focused again on empowering our staff and building our leadership capacity. And then there's two additional initiatives that really focus again on modernizing and strengthening our operational infrastructure. First, upgrading our own internal IT delivery system helps to ensure that employees have the tools needed to perform at a high level, which again directly supports that goal of delivering financing solutions that are predictable and efficient. And a new initiative around a new online and on-demand lender training system modernizes how CalHFA trains and certifies lenders by moving from a fully in-person model to a flexible online and on-demand training platform. So right now, our wonderful CalHFA staff within the single-family division travel up and down the state to deliver this training. It can be time-intensive, it can be costly, and shifting to an online system really creates meaningful efficiencies, not only for our staff in reducing that travel and administrative cost, but it also provides a consistent and accessible training experience for our lending partners. It strengthens, the reliability of our financing solutions by ensuring that lenders have easy, ongoing access to accurate product information, ultimately supporting faster, higher quality loan delivery across the state. So that's one we're particularly excited about. Collectively, these initiatives represent, in terms of what success will look like, what we think success will look like at the end of the day, is alignment of risk and capital, right? That we'll have a team of engaged experts that are driving impact, that our workforce is agile and future ready, and that our people and our technology are aligned in a way that helps us deliver on our goals.
Very good.
And that covers everything that we have in our strategic plan and the initiatives that we plan to pursue to support that. We've had some great dialogue as we've been presenting, but I welcome any additional questions or thoughts now that we've seen it in total.
And just in terms of setting the time frame, I think the goal here is to bring this, a final version of this with slightly more detail in terms of the annual business plan initiatives to the board in the June meeting, along with our budget for the 26-27 fiscal year. So we'll all be in one, so you can see how the two will interact with each other and how the strategic plan is feeding our budget, and we're using that budget to help determine how we can grow.
Great.
Yeah, this is opportunity for consider this a reading of the strategic plan, but what's in the memorandum part is the full plan, full language. So,
Yes, that was in the board.
Okay.
yeah, so we'll be asking for an action item next month. It's June next month? Yeah, next month. I don't even know what day it is, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So this is really, I guess, the last point to really provide effective
I mean,
feedback.
we're always welcoming board feedback anytime we are here.
But better now than,
I mean, we would appreciate it now, but if you get a good thought, I mean, we always appreciate it,
So I have a question.
except for
please,
Director
Bill.
Prince.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for this, because I'm kind of a strategic plan geek, so I find this stuff just so fascinating. Here's my question. You've got your goals and your metrics expressed as 3-year targets.
Yes.
Makes sense. As you move through that 3 years, do you have milestones set that will help you gauge progress toward those goals? You know what I'm saying?
It's wonderful. I'm really glad that you brought that up. That's one element that's not currently in the version you're looking at today, but our staff is working on that and plans to include that in the final version.
Okay,
So that, again, over the course of the 3 years, we can try to track and gauge our own progress.
Sure.
Are we on track? Are we off track? That's been a big way of how we report out to the board and keep you informed about our progress and hold ourselves accountable to these goals. So, yes, we will be creating those thresholds and including them in the next version.
All right, great, thank you.
We will also have production goals.
The
for
annual
board.
production goals in the business plan.
Good.
Those are not going away.
Right. Other questions, comments? Dr. Cabildo?
I realize, I don't completely understand how CalHFA's, our goals under our strategic plan will be informed by this new agency. I noticed that we didn't necessarily have language around deep affordability and building or financing units at that level. I know that, I guess I'm not sure, is it by statute? Like there's a certain number of % of affordable that you need to provide But if we wanted to go beyond that percentage, like, when is that addressed? Or is there still an opportunity after this strategic plan is that we can say we'd like to target, you know, an extra 10% or an extra 20% at a deeply affordable level? Like, when does that conversation or that policy get established?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of a very layered question in the sense that traditionally, CalHFA as the permanent lender has focused on higher income levels than a lot of the more deeply subsidized, because there's cash flow coming off of those that we can give a permanent loan on. However, one of our goals going forward in building out the construction lending program and in partnering better with our state partners is really being able to leverage the subsidy funds that are out there from HCD, other, you know, from MIP and other subsidy funds, and layer that with our financing so that naturally we will have more deeply targeted projects. I think the other piece along those lines that maybe we're not quite ready to get into yet is to really see how the guidelines and the incentives that the Housing Development and Finance Committee puts out will lead to sort of how those state funds are used. And so, in short, I fully expect CalHFA to have a broader spectrum of projects that are brought to the board for approval going forward. But what that exactly looks like, I think, depends on some of the higher level discussions at the state, as we discuss with the Housing Development and Finance Committee, as we discuss with any legislative funds that are appropriated to the state, as we work through some of the other programs that are being discussed at the legislature right now. So I don't know if Secretary Moss wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that the new committee, which is really the new department that will be responsible for the housing finance system within the new agency, the executive committee of that body includes the CalHFA director. And so that'll be the place where I think a lot of those policy discussions will take place, because we're looking at the full continuum of housing needs from, you know, our neighbors who are unhoused to our first-time home buyers. So I think it'll be a really and transparent process where the public will be able to be a part of some of those conversations, and the leadership of the executive committee will then come back to the CalHFA board with some of the opportunities and conversations that are happening within that new department.
And yeah, as you mentioned, the three members currently in statute of the Housing Development and Finance Committee all sit on this board as well. Right. It's Secretary Moss, myself, and Director Velasquez. So we will all be here. And I think one thing I didn't mention in my earlier comments, which I probably should have, is just last week, the executive director of the Housing Development and Finance Committee was appointed. And I would love to be able to bring him. His name is Jonathan Klein, a lot of experience in the state's affordable housing industry. Would love to be able to bring him maybe to the June meeting to help explain sort of what his goals are as part of as leading that committee as well.
So I find this conversation, the one you just raised, the one you guys are having with us, to be really important and really thoughtful. So I just wanted to echo bringing it up. In some of my quieter moments of listening to the presentation and thinking about it, because I agree, I find this strategic plan to be more interesting and kind of getting us closer. I started picturing like the landscape of housing and just kind of thinking about how does CalHFA overlap within those different areas and what's the role? Because you're right, there's no straight out calling or numbers around deeply affordable units, but I know we're going to be doing it, right? And so it seems to me there's like a picture about here's what society is like in terms of all these different housing needs, and then here's how CalHFA fits into them all. And it's like more of a picture than this strategic plan that is about these actions. I don't know. I would love to see it kind of keep evolving, to be thinking about what's the real goals that we're trying to do, and what's the lever that we get to pull to actually have an impact. How do we really create those thriving neighborhoods, right? And to me, that's the exciting part. And I deeply believe very low, extremely low-income families are part of a vibrant neighborhood. And so for me, it's just automatic, but I think some level we have to be explicit about that, about we as CalHFA, but.
Yeah, and maybe, I think it's a very important point, and I'm not sure we can have an exact metric about that, but I think it may be something that we can call out more explicitly, that is one of our overarching targets as part of this. We'll talk through that.
I think also we have found that if, having the multiple interactions and readings with the board with some of these documents has worked really well for us with the strategic plan, not just giving you a one-time shot. And so as we develop the new programs and are engaging with the board as we can, I mean, and not that, you know, we are who we are and we're kind of in this place in the continuum, but I think we can integrate conversations when we can, when we're designing and bringing new programs to the board and gaining your feedback. So, I mean, just because there's not a goal doesn't mean you can't challenge or have conversations around things at that point as well and give feedback in that time, if that helps. I mean, I'm not sure if that gets to your point.
And I've definitely, experienced that with the team, right? That you are responsive to what we bring up. But again, for me, and it's I understand like this, I like the ambition of the goal of like growing, but I'm like, to what end? Like, for me, it's like, if we're not housing more people at, this level, I mean, Stephen and I were talking earlier about, $50 an hour to afford an average apartment in San Diego. Like, unless we're able to create solutions for families that are facing that day in and day out, then it's a little hollow to get to kind of the five-fold increase in our asset base if we're not assisting the families that are having the toughest time securing housing in communities that are safe and thriving. So I think that they have to be married, like grow, but with a purpose, with a heart. And I know this team has a lot of heart. So those are the things that I like, to think about an integration of those two.
Very, very well. I take what you're saying, and I think I do want to integrate that somehow in one of these goals to make sure that we are focused on the multifamily lending specifically across the income spectrum, and make sure that we are making sure that we're not just focused at the higher affordable levels or anything like that.
I think that there's a component not just about the metrics and of measuring kind of these outputs that are happening, but it's like the evaluation of success and really kind of showing that it is actually leading to that healthier, vibrant neighborhood, right? So if CalHFA predominantly is serving, 60 to 80% AMI or higher within the home ownership, 60 to 80 in rental, there's this concept that like if units produced at that level, that is going to like free up lower income families or units for lower income families. And I'm not so sure that really happens, right? And so at some level, it's like if we're working in this area, what's the long-term impact that's happening throughout? Or what's the real evaluation and the success? So I don't know. So I feel like I'm trying to say yes to what I don't know the right words, but I'm trying to say yes. I think you're on the right path, and I just want to join you on that.
Thank you.
I want to, we're starting to lose folks, so I want to make sure we can wrap this part. We're close to the end.
My 1 and 2 got canceled, so I'm free.
If it works for you, Director Prince, we're all good then. Thank you. Any last questions, comments on this?
Very good.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a terrific job.
Thank you for the
Well done. And we're almost there, because I guess that'll be the June meeting, but really terrific work, the whole team on all this. Thank you. Thank you.
And please do let us know if there's any additional questions on this.
And before you leave the table, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for any public comment on this particular item. Courtney, can you see if there's anyone in the public who has something to say?
If any members of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Terrific, great, thank you. Thank you both so much. So we're going to move on to agenda item 8, update on the third quarter strategic plan.
This is just, these are just reports.
Yeah, it's in the package. That's good. I want to see if there's any questions, comments on the materials in the board package. I don't see anything from the board. Courtney, can you please see if there's any public comment on this particular item?
If any members of the public would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Thank you. And we have on the informational reports that are in the package. I think we just did, sorry, excuse me. I think we passed through that. I had a budget question, but we'll talk about the next meeting. So there's other board matters. So I took a few notes. There were things that we talked about earlier, kind of around the question of like cost and on housing projects. How do we calculate the developer inclusionary requests? I'm getting some drilling into some of the data on housing production costs, because it came up on a few of our sessions or discussions earlier would be part of it. How does the, Director Russell, you had a question, how does the emerging developer program work? I think that was a question you had, so I'm going to flag that, and I'll coordinate with our executive director on that. Director Limon, you had a question on cost development, how they might be positively impacted by legislative changes, like the impact of legislative changes on the cost structure and the timing. Yeah, that's something I think to drill into at a subsequent meeting. And Director Bilda, you raised the design standards for projects. Can we leverage CalHFA's role in this? I think that's a bigger picture conversation.
Yeah, it's a bigger picture.
Yeah. So I think those are some of the topics that came up, and I'll coordinate with Tony on that maybe for subsequent meetings. Are there any other items that board members would like to maybe raise at another board meeting that I've missed here? Don't see anything.
I don't have an item for another board meeting, just a point of information as we talk about legislative. This is another just item just to be aware of. We'll be hosting Senator Adam Schiff next Friday.
Oh.
And so the opportunity to have our senator come to the Central Valley and we host him and talk about critical issues to the Central Valley as well as across the state is an opportunity. And so just wanted you to be aware of that.
That's terrific.
Doing our part.
Good. Okay. Are there any public comments on this agenda item?
If any members of the public would like to comment, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Okay. And then we have item 10, just general public comment. I do note that we received a item emailed regarding a project on 921 Howard in San Francisco. I want to note that for the record that we received that. But I also want to see if there's any other public comment. If you could, Courtney, check and see.
If any members of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. There's none at this time.
Okay, great. And the last item is adjournment. We're adjourned. Thanks all so much.
Thank you.
Reverend